Well, good morning, everyone. We'd like to officially welcome you to the Ardar Roundup. We did get the cowbell out because what's a roundup without a cowbell? Just to try and get you all in and find a seat. We're just so excited to see so many of you here today. It's a real testament to Ardar's reputation and the great events they put on and the need to connect, and that's what we're all about. Well, I'm Diane Finstead, and I'm really excited about being back here with you this year. As I mentioned, this is the 5th annual Roundup, and every year it gets bigger and better. It's really an opportunity to expand your own knowledge hub by gaining some new ideas, talking and meeting researchers, and finding practical solutions for everyday challenges on the farm. And not only is it a beautiful day outside after our long-awaited spring rains, but our organizers have really put together an informative and interactive program for you inside today. Now, there are a few of them that will be outside later on, but you're really going to have an opportunity to explore the grounds here and get a chance to walk around and learn some different things. And all centered this year around the theme of In the Field, the Era of Digital Farming. Glad to be here with you again as we gather in this beautiful Heritage Center barn. And of course, I'm reminded how grateful we are for those who've come before us, the barn builders and land holders, and those who have been on the land ahead, and those as well who will come after to continue stewarding our land, our greatest resource. We've come together to share knowledge and identify how we can best work together for the overall betterment of the ag industry. And as we look out there, we're pleased to have nearly 400 taking in our day this year. So we've really seen that tremendous growth, and we hope you can make some new connections throughout today. You know, we've talked a long time in agriculture about how technology is advancing the industry. And really, that's always been the case, back to the days of horsepower, literally, to tractor power, and then from simple implements to the auto steer, self-driving, computerized spaceship-like accessories we have now. Even in my days as an agriculture reporter, it was astounding to see the changes that have been made in agriculture. And now we seem to be in the age of data collection, data crunching, and most importantly, data application. And that's what we need to continue to move agriculture forward. Digital ag seems to be all around us these days. We can't move without hearing about data, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, precision, robotics, and other tools that are really designed to help us make decisions. But key to it all, this morning we're going to hear about some real life experiences along with the practical applications that we need and where to find resources to support such work and making data work for you. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we dive into our content. Of course, restrooms are just off to the side. The afternoon workshops will be all across the grounds. You will find in your program in the bag a map of the grounds and a real schedule of the workshops. So you might want to do a little planning of your afternoon. Lunch will be served in the saloon across the grounds. In case of the small case of evacuation, muster point is at the north end of the parking lot where you came in. And if you have any questions about getting around or the workshops of the program, just find one of the helpful Ardar staff members and they can steer you in the right direction. Yes, they're waving at us at the back of the room. So look for the Ardar folks and they will help you out. So to start us off this morning, I'd like to ask Darcy Hillgartner, Chair of the Ardar Board, to say a few words and bring a welcome. Darcy?
Well, thank you, Diane, and good morning. I'd like to, first off, as I scan the crowd and see the number of people here, I'd like to think that it's because of our content and not because it's too windy to spray. So, on behalf of the Board of Directors and our hard-working team at Ardar, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to Roundup 2026. It is truly inspiring to see a room full of people so committed to agriculture in this province, to come together for a day of learning, sharing, and connecting. Roundup is an annual event that gives us a chance to dig into a topic that with experts, while also giving us a chance to see how that research is impacting our farms. I am very excited for the day, and I'm also very excited that we have attending Roundup 2026 our new Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, a good and longtime friend of me and Ardar, the Honorable Tara Sawyer. Now this is not the minister's first time at Roundup. She was here last year, but at that time she was a UCP candidate in a by-election for this constituency of Old Stidsbury Three Hills. Following Roundup 2025, at almost exactly a year ago today, on June 23rd, the constituents here elected her as the MLA for the region with an overwhelming mandate. Life as she knew it was disrupted. And just about a month ago, on May 21st, life again was altered when she was sworn into cabinet as our Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. I can assure you, time does not stand still for this minister. She's the 31st Minister of Agriculture in Alberta's history and the second woman, although I would not consider her second at anything. In fact, Minister Sawyer, prior to being elected as an MLA, served as chair of Grain Growers of Canada, the first woman elected to the role in the organization's history. She's also served as chair of Alberta Grains and Alberta Barley, which she was a strong advocate for farmers on agricultural policy, market access, sustainability on the farm, which she has firsthand knowledge of. Minister Sawyer lives and works on her family farm near Acme, where her and her husband, Matt, produce wheat, barley, canola, hay. Her family was named Outstanding Young Farmers in 2011 and received the Calgary Stampede BMO Family Farm Award in 2014. She not only talks the farming life, she walks the farming life alongside us. She's also owned and operated a catering business, which I did not know, which gives her experience in food and the service industry, which is probably a bit helpful in her new political life. Heat in the kitchen and calm and cool in public. Minister Sawyer has been a fierce advocate for agriculture, our rural communities and youth, and has remained an integral part of our agriculture industry. She's not shied away from the hard conversations, and she's a proven leader who is thoughtful and remains purposeful in her actions. I first met Tara at a Alberta Grain Growers of Canada summer meeting where it was her husband, Matt, who was part of that organization at the time. Tara came over to us and started talking to us, and it was really quick to see that she's the brains of the operation in the Sawyer farm. What started out as a brief conversation, I think we talked till midnight, maybe beyond. This is a woman who believes in the family farm, agriculture, and reminds us of our role of being strong advocates for our sector, our communities, and our youth. I remember thinking at the time that I need to be on top of my game when I'm around her, and she is going to go far. And look at today, we get to see her as our Minister of Agriculture, which I'm so happy to see, and I'm still working to keep up with her. Over many years, I've come to know Tara as a woman of her word who brings ethics, leadership, kindness, directness, and intelligent thought to everything she does, and she always brings style. I can tell you that she has always had the best shoes, and she has great shoes for dancing in. You may not know this about Tara, but she's an excellent dancer. It's apparently a hidden talent that most of us don't know, but it was only revealed at an Alberta Grains event at the Banff Springs one year, when she was voluntold to be part of a hypnotist program. She will tell you it was a fairly boring event. From those in the audience perspective, though, she had some moves. I'm happy to tell you, Minister, that there are no hypnotists present, but, great shoes. Minister, on behalf of the Board of Ardar Management and the attendees here today, thank you for attending Roundup 2026. The value of Ardar is not new to you, but it is, be it in the producer-led research that is helping to build a more profitable farm, the partnerships and the collaboration that is generating greater food security, or the leveraging and the stewardship of public dollars, Ardar has been and will continue to make a significant difference in agriculture and the economy of Alberta, Canada, and the world. We look forward to working with you and your team to strengthen Ardar's work, and I can assure you that we are ready and willing to meet the challenges and harness the opportunities alongside you. So friends, fellow producers, please join me in welcoming a valued, trusted friend, local MLA, and our Agriculture and Irrigation Minister, Honorable Tara Sawyer.
Pay you later for all those nice things you said. But then you owe me some back, because what happens at Prairie Cereal Summit is supposed to stay there. And I swear if there's video, it better be erased. My dancing skills are not that great. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Darcy. Those were truly kind words, and yes, we've known each other a very long time. You've done a lot of stuff yourself, but that was very, very sweet. It is a little bit surreal because, yes, of course I'm very familiar with Ardar. My husband sat on the inaugural board forming it with Dr. Chalik and all the people all those years ago, and because I was involved with the commissions and we supported it. So it was a little strange for me last year coming, not as the chair, but as a candidate. It felt a little awkward, but Dr. Chalik was kind enough to take me around. And to be back here this year as your ag minister is an honor that I don't take lightly. So it is definitely my pleasure to be here. So in terms of what I wanted to say this year, I am actually excited very much. The topics that happen at the Roundup are always very interesting, and this year's, I think, is very prevalent to the conversation when we talk about technology. So I know it's going to be a very good one. Beef, canola, pulses, tech, fertilizer, nearly every aspect of ag will be covered today. Events like this are vital to the ag sector. They offer an opportunity for folks from so many diverse industries to get together, see some friendly faces, and learn a thing or two. There are plenty of familiar faces here for me, but for those who don't, you listen to a very nice, I don't know, I'm gonna have to talk to them. We gotta shorten my thing. I'm sorry there's a lot of that they made you read. Maybe we could take out. Made you read about me for like 5 minutes. I learned a little bit about myself in that, so that was kind of fun. I do wanna talk about the priorities I have in my new role. I think it's really important that we thank R.J. Sigurdsson. He did great work representing as our ag minister, and I really valued my time when I used to have to speak to him, and I'm pleased I can call him a friend. I do plan to pick up where he left off, ensuring that the sector has the support it needs to continue to grow and thrive. Ag is not just a massive economic driver for our province. It's one of the major building blocks of our history, and it's a way of life for so many Albertans. And it's a story that I take pride in sharing everywhere I go. As Minister of Ag, I will make sure that the voices of Alberta's producers and ranchers are heard loud and proud. I want them to know I will be advocating for them at every level, everywhere the job takes me, which is something I've always done. Your hard work and dedication is part of the reason I'm optimistic about the future of agriculture in Alberta. Everyone knows we're a beef province, but we're also leading the way in barley, honey, processed potatoes, and so much more. Though last year showed a bit of a dip, our ag exports do remain strong. With China reopening its borders to Canadian canola and beef and emerging markets showing more demand for Alberta ag products, I do expect we'll continue to see strong numbers and growth this year and beyond. But with growth comes evolution. As this year's Roundup theme reflects, we're firmly in the era of digital farming. It only takes a quick glance at today's agenda to see that farming has evolved by leaps and bounds from our parents' and our grandparents' days. With tech playing a bigger and bigger role in agriculture, it seems like you need two numbers on speed dial during seeding and harvest, your parts guy and your IT guy. It's true. But as anyone can tell you, the one thing that never changes is the need that we work together. Ardar especially knows the value of working together to get things done, and as it enters its 6th year, it is now firmly established as a leader and collaborator in ag research. More than half of Ardar's project outcomes reach the field within 3 years, and that is an impressive achievement. They work across industry, post-secondary, and multiple levels of government to ensure that every dollar invests has an even bigger impact. And I am always impressed with their work, so to the board, keep up the good work. Ardar has also been a key partner for the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, playing a crucial role in ensuring SCAP funding goes to research that has a direct impact on Alberta's farmers, and that is the key. We want research that our farmers can actually use and that makes sense. To date, across all the SCAP programs, we have approved more than 3,600 grants valued at over $173 million. We rely on Ardar to deliver the Accelerating Agriculture Innovations Program on behalf of my ministry. That program alone provides $57.9 million. That is not a small amount. It's also worth noting that Ardar leverages the research funds with industry and other partners, nearly tripling their impact. So to all of those partners who recognize we need more funding and research, so the fact that you're investing is key. Later next month, I am going to Halifax for the FPT meetings of Ag Ministers. A big part of our discussions there will be the next iteration of SCAP and how we can make it work better for producers across the country. I cannot wait to get to that table. I have had the opportunity to speak with Saskatchewan Ag Minister. We work closely with them, and we're quite aligned, not only in what we feel is important, but I think in our bluntness based on our first conversation. We're going to get along just fine. I just don't think they recognize what they're in for with me, Devin. They made the mistake in our first group with all the Ag Minister calls I was on. Someone was lamenting, oh, we're really going to miss RJ. You know, he was a strong voice at that table, and he didn't pull any punches. I took the mute off. I said, it's very nice to meet you as well. And I said, I started to laugh. I said, you don't know me. But if you did, you're going to regret putting that challenge down, because challenge accepted. You thought RJ was loud at a table. So we're going to get along just fine. Let's just say that. Now I lost my place because I was telling you a story. During the meeting that we are having, I will be expressing my disappointment in the federal government's decision to close so many research centers across Canada, including the one in Lacombe. And I will say RJ was already doing that work. Ag and Irrigation, Ardar, and WCI staff work closely with the staff at the Federal Lacombe Research Centre. The closure will undoubtedly have a negative impact on collaborations that support crop and livestock research in Alberta, and it is a step in the wrong direction. It's a tough conversation to have with the feds, but you can't say that you value agriculture and you understand the importance of research. I'm going off. Sorry, Callum. You can't get rid of research dollars and then say it's important. So I look forward to having that little conversation with them. In the meantime, I do plan on enjoying the discussions and the ideas that you all are going to be sharing today. So I do want to thank Ardar and everyone involved in putting this year's roundup together. We're back in this lovely setting, Deb, that you have here. It's always a pleasure to come out here for the Ardar roundup. I hope you all take the opportunity to attend at least one of the speaking engagements or workshops. You're really in for a treat if you've never had the Irricana Lions barbecue lunch that they provide. As we were discussing earlier, start with the pie, then go to the meat, if you want to get your chosen flavor of that delicious pie. I am able to stay a little longer than we originally thought, so I am looking forward to having some conversations with you all before lunch, and I look forward to talking to you all. It's really, gosh, it's great to be here with friends and making some new ones, but I love ag, and I'm so excited to be your ag minister. I'm just going to say it because it's a crowd of friends. Like, let's go. So,
Well, thank you, Minister Sawyer. I'm sad to see that your passion for agriculture has waned. Not. It's been incredible watching your journey from the tractor to the ag organization boardroom, and then, of course, now to the cabinet table and on the national scene as well. So it's just so encouraging to have people like you with real-life agriculture experience helping shape the policy of the future. Now, I just am scanning the room, and I see there's a lot of you that like to sit in the back row of the classroom. Standing at the back row, I've been instructed we have lovely seats up front, and we do still have some people coming in who might actually need to stand at the back. So I'm just going to give you a moment to come on up front. Ken Coles, there's a seat right up here. You ask good questions. I think you need to be at the front of the room. So if we can just have a little migration to the front of the room, that would be wonderful. There's some prime seats. You know, at concerts, people pay big bucks to be at the front, so we're giving you a deal. So yeah, come on up and enjoy the program from the front row perspective. Awesome, thank you. Maybe we should give them a hand. That's not easy to do. Do you think? Yes. Perfect. Well, we're also delighted this morning to be joined by Angela Albers. Angela is the Reeve of Mountain View County, and she'd like to bring a few words of greetings. So let's put our hands together again and welcome Angela Albers.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. My council is hard at work at a policy and governance review committee right now, so woohoo, me, yeah. And it's fantastic to look out and see the room. When you haven't had the room to put tables in and you can only fit chairs, you know you're making it. So congratulations to this group for drawing such an amazing crowd. I'm Angela Albers, I'm the Reeve of Mountain View County, and it's my pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of our council and administration to the RDAR's Roundup 2026. Thank you, Minister Sawyer, for taking the important role as the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. Mountain View County is proud to have you represent us as an MLA, and now as a prominent minister for not only our community, for all of Alberta. Amazing, and I love Minister Sawyer because she is unable to stick to a script, because she has so much passion and so much to say, and I just love watching you speak, and I love your enthusiasm. So thank you. We're very, very lucky as Alberta. On behalf of our council and residents, thank you for choosing the Heritage Centre in Mountain View County. It's been said, but it can't be stated enough, an amazing facility to host such a great event. Agriculture has always been the heart of the region, and we recognize the important role that research, innovation, and collaboration play in ensuring a strong and sustainable future for Alberta producers. Events like this bring together farmers, ranchers, researchers, industry leaders, innovators to share knowledge, explore ideas, and strengthen connections that help support and grow our agriculture industry. Mountain View County is proud to support agriculture and the people who drive it every day. The work being showcased by RDAR helps ensure producers have access to practical solutions and research that delivers the benefits in the fields. Mountain View County Council prides itself on building collaborative and respectful relationships. I want this group to know that we are here to be your municipal partner of choice, a partner committed to helping advance your initiatives, programs, and ideas. We are fortunate to have an exceptional administrative team, a very dedicated agriculture service board, and a diverse, knowledgeable group of elected officials who are passionate about serving the community and embracing new challenges. We value our strong working relationship with the Government of Alberta and recognize the importance of working together to achieve positive outcomes for residents, communities, and businesses. Over the past several years, Mountain View County has championed a number of resolutions that have received endorsements from the members of the rural municipalities of Alberta, demonstrating our commitment to identifying challenges, advancing practical solutions, and advocating for rural Alberta. I just wanted to go through some of the resolutions to give you a bit of an idea. So in 2022, we put forward a resolution for the attraction, retention of the veterinarians to rural veterinarian practices, requesting support for attraction and retention actions to reduce veterinarian professional shortages, especially in rural Alberta, and also to develop new programs at the UCVM. And we were so thrilled to work with the university, an absolutely amazing organization that's supporting rural Alberta in every aspect that they do. We also put forward a resolution to request that the government look at the loss of agriculture land to renewable energy, and also look at renewable energy projects, reclamation securities. The focus here was to make sure that the province was finding a balance between renewable energy development and the agriculture lands that are so important to our food production. We wanted to request mandated reclamation securities so that we didn't end up with anything that would any way mimic the orphan wells that we currently have in the province. On both of those, I have to say they were a huge success, and the government took us seriously, and we were thrilled with the new policies that came out. We looked at we've put forward a resolution to improve water licenses, approvals, and compliance processes, trying to get the government to look at moving the temporary diversion license approvals from the AER to environment and protected areas, and retain the AER as the compliance board. This is important. It's also important that temporary diversion licenses, the process in which they go through is very public, and that public understands why they're doing it and when they're doing it. We've requested that there's rural participation on the Integration Council for refocusing Alberta's healthcare system in order to make sure that the rural voice is always heard when developing any new policies or any new administrative legislation. We couldn't do this advocacy work without your ideas, your input, and your support. Your perspectives help shape the issues we bring forward and strengthen our collective voices. I'll leave this with you today because I think it's so important. When you're going through your discussions today, if there is an issue, an initiative, or an opportunity where Mountain View County can assist, please don't hesitate to reach out. I welcome, as my fellow councillors do and as our administration does, we welcome the opportunity to meet over a coffee and discuss how we can work together to advance shared priorities. Thank you to ARDAR, its partners, sponsors, speakers, and everyone attending today for your commitment to advancing Alberta agriculture. I hope you have an amazing day. Your lineup of workshops and speakers is absolutely fantastic, and I hope you enjoy the day, and I hope you enjoy Mountain View County. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Angela, and thank you for the work that you and your council and the county do on behalf of agriculture in rural Alberta. Well, RARDAR has been very busy over the last several years with more good work to do ahead. And steering the ship for the last 5 years has been CEO Mark Redmond. He brings a great blend of perspectives to this role, from being a scientific researcher himself, as well as an inventor, an innovator, administrator, education leader, and entrepreneur. But most importantly, he also understands value adding in agriculture and the role research needs to play in that process. So to provide an overview of ARDAR activity and what lies ahead, let's say hello to Mark Redmond.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to our third showcase here at Cremona. It's always great to see a packed room as we have today. And Minister, you said that you're amongst friends. I think we are all amongst friends. It's great to see so many of you here today. It's a privilege to report to you, but after the opening remarks, actually, I don't think there's much I can add to what ARDAR has done to the Minister. But for many of you, I think there'll be some new things to learn and to see how we can link you at the center of a network of researchers and partners. And today, I'd like to tell you a simple story of what we have built over the last 5 years. And most important, the task that's in front of us now. The title you can see is simple, From Innovation to Adoption. However, the journey that Alberta agriculture is on, and the one that we are talking about today, determines the return on every investment dollar we put into research. Let me put the conclusion first, because everything follows from it. After 5 years of working alongside you, in the industry, in government, in researchers, and we have a lot of you in the room today, we have reached an evidence-based view. We don't have an innovation problem in Canada. You'll hear the media talking a lot about we don't support research enough. I would counter that in terms of we actually have an adoption challenge. And as producers, you are going to be the key to that challenge. Canada produces rigorous science. Where we struggle is the pace at which that technology reaches the farm and the ranch, your operations. The good news is we've got the foundation to make that change. The capacity, the partnerships, the knowledge base, they are all now in place. So the priority going forward is singular: getting proven innovation adopted and adopted at scale. So before I go any further, let me name something about this room. The Roundup is first and foremost a producer event. We borrowed an expression from the healthcare system addressing those who we serve. And that expression is, nothing about me without me. And I think for too many years, research has been done without you, the producers. The producer sits at the center of everything Ardar does, by direction, not by accident. Researchers and partners are here to support everything that we do. And just looking in the room today, I see Alberta Beef Producers, Alberta Grains, Olds College, UCVM, Genome Alberta, and I'm going to forget somebody now, of course, the Applied Research Associations, Farming Smarter, Ken's here. You're all valuable part of this integrated system in terms of how we deliver. So, our next initiatives and initiatives that we do will be with producers and not for you. Because every project succeeds or fails at one moment, and that's the moment you as producers choose to adopt a new technology. Obviously, an important phone call. I think many of you know I love numbers. So the foundation in numbers, and I'm not going to go through these because actually the minister, I think, has already told us about them. But the most important one probably is that 2.7 times a multiplier on every dollar that we put into a research project. That tripling allows us to deliver results at scale. So more than numbers, we can look at some of the values. 233 new products, 170 new crop varieties, food, feed, forages put into the field. We support more than 2,000 jobs, and importantly, 74 of those jobs are in the value-added processing sector, a great opportunity for this province to add value to the products that you farm. And we invested $49 million into operations like Farming Smarter, into the universities to build capacity, important capacity that will help keep Alberta competitive in the future. That same work has gone on to inform policies on water allocation, on disease preparation. And we met with the Deputy Minister yesterday. He spoke very passionately about what keeps him awake at night is actually the fear of the next disease outbreak. And I'm going to put in a little plug here. I golf script as well. Those of you who actually listen to our podcast, The Final Mile, will have heard Minister Shelley McClellan and I've forgotten what Vern's last name is. Olson, talking about their experience as ag ministers. And actually the scope of your job, Minister, is enormous and I think highly underrated when we look at the role of other ministries. But they talk about how it was to wake up to the news that we had BSE and the outbreak and how we dealt with that and how we dealt with that very effectively. We are facing threats today of other diseases coming, foot and mouth disease, African swine fever. We have to be ready for those. And so our work with UCVM and others is really important to protecting agriculture. Excuse me. So, the results, the numbers here show that our approach is working. And the minister's already highlighted these results. So all I'm going to say is we designed research from the start with adoption in mind. The old adage, begin with the end in mind, absolutely applies to what we do. And what we need to do now is scale that approach. So what are the key factors that differentiate Ardar? I'll highlight 4. First, we are producer-led. We're governed by producers. The board is elected by producers, and that gives us an edge. The board represents members of the 30 commodity associations across Alberta. So the board are your spokespeople. That allows us to say our priorities are your priorities. Second, every project must have a business case. And having worked through a board meeting yesterday arguing the benefits of new technologies, the board actually had the ability to ask tough questions of researchers and of management. What's the business case here? Where's the real economic benefit? Third, every project has an amount committed to delivering results at the farm, something we call the final mile. And fourth, Dr. Chalik will say, speed is our currency. We deliver our decisions at speed, speed unlike any other funding association. We're able to render decisions in 6 to 8 weeks. Others take 6 to 8 months. That is a competitive edge, and a competitive edge for our researchers in terms of getting technology into your hands. The third point, it's the one that I'm really passionate about, the final mile, deserves another moment, because it's at the heart of what makes us different. In the past, change came slowly to our farms. Or, even worse, it did not come at all. We have research papers sitting on the shelf, hard work, not creating value where it counts on the farm. So we have to show that research projects are farm ready, or will result in farm ready technology, be measurable, another word that I love, and to have a dedicated plan and budget showing how the technology will be taken forward. And that in part is a big part of what Roundup is about, putting technology into your hands and showing you the benefits. And what that does, people are all familiar with the typical S-curve of adoption. That gray curve, through the approach that Ardar has adopted, is pushed to the left to that green line, accelerating adoption. And we accelerate that adoption through very many of our programs. I'm going to mention 2, and you're going to have to remember the acronyms. You might have seen them already this morning. First is the Producer Research and Evaluation Project. and the second is the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, OFCAF. Those two mechanisms allow us to work with you as producers to help offset and lower the barriers to adopting technology and to allow that technology to become practice based on local evidence. That local evidence is essential. It's why we do work with the 12 applied research and forage associations across the province. Because what works in one area may not work in another. So our approach, we engage the willing, the early adopters. We develop that local evidence, and we compress a journey which could otherwise be a decade into a more manageable, effective timeline. So, okay, if you take away the message of only one slide today, I'd say it was this one. Before any producer adopts a technology, they're going to ask 3 questions. The first one, what does it cost? Actually, I like to call this the spouse's question, specifically in terms of how much do you say it's going to cost us to make that change? The question is not just the base price, it has to be the fully inclusive price of adopting that technology. Nope, you laughed at my joke. Must be too many spouses asking questions. Second, what is the return on that investment proven on Alberta land like theirs, like yours, and not promised in a brochure or a research paper from another part of Canada? And third, who can help me succeed? Who is a local trusted source to help me adopt change? And so, Minister, I'd say we actually need 3 numbers on your speed dial. One is your parts guy, one's your IT guy, and the other one is who the hell can help you get the combine running again in the middle of the night? If we answer these questions clearly, adoption's going to follow. If you leave one unanswered, then adoption's going to stall. However good the science is. So let me stop talking about numbers, Shane, and I'll show you what this looks like, operating at scale. 3 producers, 3 returns, each one answering those 3 questions. We'll start with Brad and Terry Mappin at Bymore in the dry lands of Stettler, running a cattle operation. Ardar provided them with $20,000 to adopt Wyoming snow fence. This was through the work of Quinn Devine, and actually one of our first speakers at this event, John Pomeroy, who does a lot of water analysis, he actually invented this fencing when he was doing his postgraduate studies in Wyoming. And actually, I think we need to rebrand this, the Pomeroy fence or the Alberta fence, because it's actually no more a Wyoming fence than any other jurisdiction. But Brad used the fence to fill dugouts to water his cattle, dugouts that were hard to fill. And you can see the results of this technology. 2 dugouts full, 1 2/3 full. The investment, and these are Brad's numbers, you can see, there you go. I've got the numbers. $36,000 in savings in the first season for a $20,000 investment. Plus, this technology will continue to give back year after year. The expected life expectancy of the fencing is 20 years. And so those of you who are here last year may remember that we had a small mock-up of the fencing. This is simple technology at work. And the digital aspect here is the hard hand work of the producer putting this together. But we have the blueprints, this is scalable, and it can make a change to your ranching operations. Second, OFCAF. Since 2022, we've delivered the OFCAF program here in Alberta, covering 3 BMPs: cover cropping, nitrogen management, and rotational grazing. We've approved over 4,000 projects. We have delivered $65 million into the hands of producers to adopt change, to lower those barriers of adopting different practices. And more than $2 million have been enrolled into the program. The good news is the program, the OFCAF program, will extend for another 2 years till 2028, and will deliver approximately another $20 million a year into the hands of producers. So over the lifetime of that program, we'll have put over $100,000 into the hands of producers, into your hands to bring about change, and resilient change, practices that will be adopted year after year after year. Rotational grazing is one of the most popular programs across Canada, we have learned, and actually gives very clear indications of the financial benefits. It can turn a ranching operation from moderate profitability to high profitability on a per cow basis. The OFCAF program delivers the tools to you to adopt rotational grazing. Up till now, razor-grazer fencing, electric fencing, different watering systems so that you make sure that the animals are able to access the water that they need to optimize performance. And this year, we're very pleased to introduce a new phenomenon. You'll be able to see it in practice outside, virtual fencing. So what does that look like? Looks like bling for bovines. So collars, necklaces that actually allow you to electronically, digitally control the paddock system that your animal's grazing. Rotational grazing has been very popular amongst producers to date. However, they have not fully optimized the system because needing to get up and move fencing, having topography of fields, which is difficult to set up fencing, has restricted the use. Virtual fencing eliminates all of those challenges. So let's hear from a producer, virtually. Many of you know Doug Ray. He and his nephew Tim farmed at Irricana. And Doug and Tim took part in a pilot project to test virtual fencing. And you can see Doug's comments here in terms of being able to move his heifers between rotational and swath grazing. And the punchline there is, rather than having Tim drive out to shift electric fences, to move the herd from a screen in the office. And by damned, it worked. And Doug was not easily convinced. I did talk to him in the early stages of adopting this technology. So that labor actually saved time in moving fences, and it brought a practice that his neighbors were able to come and see and believe. The digital era of farming is now coming to our ranches. And the footnote here is, as a result of the pilot study, Doug and Tim have now applied for the maximum amount of funding available under OFCAF, $100,000. So I love this picture. It shows even better the Ray's neighbors coming to see what they've been able to do and achieve, to learn how to put innovations to work. But better still, Tim's daughter, the next generation of ranchers, is absolutely passionate about adopting technology. And so we see here that it's not only the current generation who are adopting new technologies. We know that technology is going to last because actually the legacy of generations is being built into the research that's being done. Third example, and actually we'll move from the field to the genome. Canadian Angus and others have initiated the heifer selection program, made free through an RDR grant to producers to optimize the selection of genetics in their beef animals. This program is actually going to give commercial producers the tools in selecting replacement heifers based on performance, efficiency, and resilience rather than appearance alone. So a few more numbers. These are the indices you can see: growth, feed efficiency, maternal traits, and carcass quality. But look at the returns. The returns in terms of faster weaning weight gain. At today's prices, $17,000 worth of benefit. In terms of the efficiency of breeding, if you have a heifer open rate reduced by 5%, you're going to get 5 more calves a year. Another $17,000. These are model gains from our research at Cage Latimer. However, they show how a single decision actually affects profitability year over year at the herd and the sector level. And so this is how Alberta is going to position itself as a continued leader in beef production, delivering high-quality beef to high-value customers. Now, actually, a word to the researchers in our audience. It may sound that Ardar is retreating from discovery. It's far from the case. The adoption we've spoken about today sits at that bottom left quadrant of a famous 2x2 square. And you can see we're looking at our portfolio of investments as these as quick wins. What are we going to deliver to producers now to improve their economics? But you can see we have 3 other areas. Game changes like using biologics, data interoperability, AI. We have frontier bets, things in the longer term. And you can say, boy, drones aren't a frontier bet. Well, they were. And actually, continued investment will make it so. And steady builders. Projects such as us looking at plants other than pulses for fixing nitrogen. So far from us limiting our focus, we're managing our portfolio, and there is room for innovation, providing that innovation meets our test in having a deliverable to the farm. So where does this take us to 2030? 4 priorities. Number 1 is profitability, productivity. That's important because without profitability, you don't need Ardar. Second, we're looking at the people and the organizations who catalyze making those changes and adoptions attainable. And thirdly, the exemplary governance, because we are the stewards of public funds. And 4 imperatives how we work. We are here today to listen to you, to hear your ideas, to engage with you. We act at speed, because speed is our currency. Dr. Chell could be happy I mentioned that twice today. Third, focus on those areas, those proposals that will deliver the benefits that we need now. And then fourthly, stay accountable and measure impact. So we heard from the minister that you're on the way to Halifax. It actually asks one thing when you sit at the table with the other ministers, and that is actually at critical juncture in your discussions to play your Ardar card, to show other ministers, and I know you're keen to do this, having pressed your button, show them how we have a model that actually can deliver, leading research the Ardar way, delivering something proven in a producer-led model that links research to adoption. So let me close where I began. Our foundation is built, 5 years, more than 600 projects, leveraged, and a producer-led system that works. The task is now from moving generating knowledge to accelerating it to adoption. More cooperative extension, more demonstration, more producer-led validation to close that gap between what is known and what is practiced. So whatever the project, thank you, just stole my script. Can I have it back, please? Thank you. I think I'd memorize that by now. So whatever the project, whatever the technology, start with the producer's decision, what it costs, what the returns will be, and who can help you succeed. For us, nothing about you without you. This is your initiative. It took 5 years to build, and we're happy to spend time today talking to you more about some of these aspects in detail. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and certainly some impactful stories and numbers about the adoption and the need for more adoption of innovation, and that's what today is all about. Well, you've already met him as the ARDAR board chair, but now we're going to hear from Darcy Hillgartner, producer. From his farm in the Camrose area, Darcy manages day-to-day data to drive decision-making for his own operation. But he does so as a new generation farmer, committed to using agriculture research to improve his on-farm production. Now, he gained an appreciation for all of that in maybe a unique way by getting his medical lab science degree. But he's seen in serving the industry on a variety of commodity boards that making that a seamless process comes with challenges, that whole adoption. And we look forward to hearing about what he's been learning along the way. So welcome back, Darcy.
Thanks, Diane. So like many farms, my dad's data repository, his handheld device, was something like this. Small notebook kept in the left pocket of his shirt. It was the corporate record of our farm. Planting dates, calf birth records, grain inventory, herbicide usage, it was all there. As the sole proprietor of our small dairy and grain farm, it was perfect. He was part of every operation on our farm, so no worries about missing anything. Equipment guidance, well, that was how straight your drill rows were. And it was a thing of pride. There was a few people that would have physical markers on their seed drills, but they never really worked well. And those that used them were maybe seen as not quite up to the task. As equipment grew in size, especially things like sprayers, keeping an eye on that outside edge became a challenge. Once you were lined up on the drill row, you could keep going, but then you're back to depending on the abilities of the person that seeded that crop originally. For a while, foam markers were the latest innovation, better than depending on that seed row, but it wasn't great. As a kid, my initial field work was tillage, a perfect role for a young apprentice. If you don't miss anything or hit anything, you were golden. Dad showed you how to line up with a fence post or other reference point, and that was your 1980s version of an AB line. You got pretty good at it, but as you got close to someone relieving you or bringing you a meal, you need that corrective AB line to take out those curves that you had introduced. At one time, you knew you made it when, as part of the seeding crew, you got to seed the field closest to the farm or the one along the busy road. Our first dip of our toes into the world of precision agriculture was in 2002. We got a Midtech Swath Excel guidance system. I was so excited. WASP receiver, 18-inch light bar up front there, but you moved it from machine to machine because you couldn't afford to have more than one of those. I remember that first year we used it. We had one piece of land that's 3/4 in a row, and it's kind of a downhill slope from the road. Every neighborhood farmer wanted to know who seeded that so straight. It was the talk of the coffee shop. And and this is early days of guidance, where it was decimeter accuracy, so it was 2 feet at best. But compared to what we had before, it was incredible. All of a sudden, our fields got smaller and we were more efficient because of the less of overlap. And we had our first application maps. Not exactly easy to extract off the unit, but they were better than the multiple notebooks that we were now having, and even though those still remained as your backup method. The next move was to yield monitoring in the combine. We had an egg liter display, 4x4 screen off to the side, but we had 2 combines and only 1 of those. So, it was great to see those yield maps, even when it was only 50%, so you had these just kind of bars across there, but to see how the crop yielded. And I remember showing those to my father at the time, and he was a great believer in technology as a thing of the future, but even he had his doubts because he said to me, well, of course that area of the field yielded more and the piece by the road yielded less. Anyone could have told you that. But the next year we got it in our second combine, so now I got a complete map. But now I'm introduced to the world of machine-to-machine interoperability. When you looked at that map, even though the combines were calibrated, they didn't match. And so you had to tweak the data and go through it to make sure that they were had a side-by-side comparison. It was time-consuming and not easy to do. Next jump was auto steer. We put in an auto track system in one of our tractors. It was complicated to set up, hard to calibrate, not terribly user-friendly, but once you got it going, it worked pretty well. Following the light bar was great, but this was fantastic. And you didn't realize how much less operator fatigue you had over a season until you used one of those. The system was not terribly fast or responsive, so it couldn't be used in a sprayer quite yet, but it was a definite step in the right direction. Section control in our seeding system and in our sprayer was the next step. Didn't create that visual difference, but the economics were substantial. Even with guidance and auto steering, it never failed that you would end up with that strip at the end of the field that was going to be half the width of your seeder or half the width of your sprayer that you're going to have to go all the way down with. This changed that. Advancements continued, better GPS guidance, faster reactions, more accurate data collection with more parameters. What was originally a great piece of data acquisition was soon becoming an overload. Getting the data off your equipment took time, didn't always work, and was incomplete. Anyone that had to get data off these old PCM CIA cards knows the challenge those could be at times. Variable rate applications, advanced soil mapping, and the ability to track more variables is excellent for data collection, but it was soon becoming a greater challenge to manage. Enter the realm of manufacturer-based data collection, first by giving you a place where you could store that thumb drive data, stick, and then a cloud-based storage location. Great if all your major equipment was from one manufacturer, and then raise the question of data ownership and who actually controls your data. On our farm, as with many others, we don't run one color of equipment. Our equipment list is built on meeting the needs of the operation. What does the best job? Not so it matches. Other times it's what is based on cost or availability. The manufacturer-based solutions work great if you own all the same equipment from one manufacturer. Makes sense. But if you have a rainbow, like we had, it can sometimes be a mess. So we look for solutions that would collate the data into a single system. And we've tried many over the years, and they've worked good, but now I still have copious amounts of data. What do I do with that? I've always said that technology is a wonderful thing when it works. I'm sure the AV guys this morning could attest to that. But when it doesn't, it's a nightmare. And with our desire to do more, with higher efficiency, more accuracy, more than ever it becomes a challenge. Software issues, incompatible electronics, cables that break, solar flares that mess up GPS signals, incompatible lack of cellular service are all examples of the trials that a farmer has to face. And these tests usually happen when there's storm clouds in the horizon or the wind's about to pick up or you're just looking at this beautiful sunny day and you're sitting there. At that moment, what was a tech problem becomes a lost productivity problem. As with many producers in the room, we have an abundance of apps on our laptops, tablets, and phones. Constantly looking for that program that can take that data, overlay the information, and make better decisions. Data management is our new frontier, being able to make accurate decisions using information on our own farms, doing our own trials, doing things like what Olds has with their on-farm experimentation program. These are the things that are going to drive the better decisions. But having the tools like AI to sift through the terabytes of data that we have to turn assumptions into evidence-based outcomes. Okay, it's farming. I would love to think the answers are going to be all black and white, but that's unlikely. There's just too many variables to control. But data doesn't replace experience, but it does sharpen it. It helps us to make decisions with confidence. When I look ahead to where agriculture is heading, it's with better data, better analysis that leads to better decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Darcy. Well, that is some real life experience and again, some real life challenges that I'm sure many of you can relate to as well. As we carry on, our next speaker is Dr. Sidney Shapiro, and he is joining us from the University of Lethbridge, where he's an assistant professor of business analytics in the Dillon School of Business. His work is in applied artificial intelligence, which examines how organizations, communities, and ecosystems use data and emerging technologies to drive innovation, resilience, as well as social impact. But Sidney's focus is to connect academic research with practical knowledge mobilization. And again, that sounds familiar, just like Ardar's focus. So we're really looking forward to your insights. Let's welcome Dr. Shapiro.
All right, good morning. If it wasn't for technology problems, I wouldn't have a job, so this is okay. Hopefully we can get it working in a second. So, good morning, I'm Sidney Shapiro, and we're going to talk about practical ways to use data and AI infrastructure in order to build new pieces. And hopefully, we get the computer working. We'll do some live coding. I'll show you some examples of how you could take these tools and build things that are amazing. I think one of the big challenges is that there's tons of hype around AI, and the biggest problem is that it doesn't really translate to value. So we're now, or more recently, in a situation where AI is becoming more and more expensive. And as it does, we're suddenly in this environment where companies have been trying to get us to adopt AI, and suddenly the bill is coming in, because it really doesn't cost $20 a month. It costs a lot more, and then suddenly you want to build things, and it doesn't work great. So thank you very much for Ardar for having me, and hopefully you find something interesting in this that you could take away and start doing the exact same things that we're going to do today and build. So I have some slides. We'll do some live coding. I should tell you that I did a talk like this a week ago in Toronto. It did not work at all. Everything didn't work. The minister says we're among friends, so hopefully you don't hold it against me. I always tell my students, just pretend that you were impressed. Alberta is a fantastic place to build practical tools. And this is for many different reasons. Oh, we have the wrong display. How about, there we go. And there's so many areas that are ripe for technological innovation, streaming data, looking at where we could make an impact, and doing things smarter and more cheaply. I'll tell you about a TV studio that I worked with in Vancouver. They do 1 unit of work per hour using some process. Somebody sits on a computer and does this 1 unit of work. And the people called me up and said, you're not going to believe it. Using ChatGPT, we dropped in all the files, we pressed a button, and now we could do 3 units of work. And that is amazing. Like ChatGPT AI is dramatically changing what we're able to do. And I said, like, that doesn't make any sense. You bought this computer, it's sitting in your office. You could ask AI to build you a program that runs on your computer that does 1,000 units of work for free. One of my colleagues built a spreadsheet that's been used for 30 years, millions of times. And that spreadsheet over and over again had this scale of economy. It was free to open for the next 30 years. If we're relying on an AI process that's cost money every single time that we're running something, then we really quickly run into the situation where it becomes too expensive and impractical to use. So I think that there's some areas where AI really works well, and things where maybe it's not such a good fit, even though it's a really cool technology. I always tell people, you're not Google. Your job is to find value, not to build cool new technology. Google could afford losing money on cool technology. It's really about finding patterns and thinking about how can we use the computer to leverage those patterns into making better decisions. Like Darcy said, for the past 20 years, we've been collecting data at huge volumes. And suddenly we're like, what do we do with this data? How do we translate the data into value? And that's where this is really coming through with AI that can sift through massive amounts of data, build you a program, and help you figure that out. So, it's important to understand what AI can do, make sure that it's right, and put the pieces together that you're able to build something useful, and we'll work on that today. Now, I did a talk with the PGA looking at building potato apps, and we built an app. The agronomist looks at it and says, none of these numbers make sense. Like, this doesn't, it looks nice and it kind of works. Really, you have to leverage domain expertise, knowledge from the field, trying to bring in pieces of industry into what you're trying to do with AI. So AI is not a magic panacea that replaces your brain. In fact, it could help you leverage the things that you actually know and looking at processes that make sense in order to build, not wholesale replace you, and that's not realistic. So I hear a lot, usually the conversation starts with Terminators, but usually I hear about, this idea of how we could start leveraging technology. This is a critical element of it, taking your expertise and using new tools to build sustainable, cost-effective tools that impact ROI. And that's really the takeaway. So when we look at these messy patterns that we have in data, we're trying to do a few different things. We could look at things like prediction, like with yield, disease, and demand, classification, weed versus crops, green on green, et cetera, and optimization. But AI can't replace clear goals, good measurements, human accountability. In fact, I'll tell you, and thank you for Ardar for inviting me, but I wouldn't have been here had my ChatGPT prompt that said, tell me how to make a huge amount of money, worked. I'd be on an island somewhere, but here we are. Here you all are. Yeah, apparently it doesn't work like that. And the challenge is that it's like, okay, so a lot of students come to my classes and tell me they want to build trading bots using AI to trade on the stock market. And that sounds great. There's only one small problem. Why is your bot smarter or better than anybody else's? You have to know about finance and markets and trading. But they're like, no, I don't know anything. I'm not going to learn that. I'm just going to build the bot. Everybody's doing that. Everybody has a bot. Everybody's bot is trading against every other's bot, and nobody wins. So you really have to think about how do you take your context and turn that into an app in a way that makes sense. In AI right now, there's many new things that are happening, like multimodal AI. So you could take a picture, you could walk around with a video camera and say, what am I looking at? And it will tell you. You could have longer context, bigger windows of information it's able to understand. So it's important to know that AI models, in large language models, although they have access to billions of books, they can only hold a few hundred in memory at any one time, a few hundred pages. It's getting a little longer, but they're still not that intelligent. We now have agents and agent workflows that can do things for you, and they can go off and you do a goal, and they'll try to accomplish it. And we also have smaller models, Edge AI, which is more cost-effective, and they can actually do really small things. And we're going to talk about, we could also have better computer vision. Now, I tried this because, I never changed the oil on my car, and I figured this is a rite of passage, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I took a picture of my car, and I told ChatGPT, what do I do? And it said, go to Canadian Tire, here's a list of stuff to buy, no problem. So I got under my car, all the things purchased, and I said, what's next? And they said, turn that bolt. And I was like, are you 100% sure? And they're like, no, that's actually the steering fluid bolt. You do not want to turn that one. You're looking for the oil pan bolt. I'm like, my feet are pointing to the front of the car. I'm under the car. what do I do next? And it says, look for a bolt. It should be the oil pan. So this problem of connecting real live, real world data through a sensor, which in this case is the camera, to actual knowledge doesn't come from what works best for most people. I want to know what works for my actual car. What works in my particular context? And that can be really difficult if it has no idea what's going on. Last year we worked on research and we were wondering why people are typing into search engines, chats, etc. Why is my kid crying? And AI will tell you a really nice reason why your kid is crying. But of course, the context part is, how old is your kid? Your kid could be 30. You're probably not going to burp them. I hope not. But you see the point. The point is that it has to understand your context to be effective. It has to actually know your car and know which bolt to turn. And if it doesn't, you're going to get great advice. And if you told it, wait, I just turned the wrong bolt, what do I do now? It's going to say, I'm sorry, you're right, I was wrong. That doesn't help you. So you got to really figure out, how do I align this in the real world to make it make sense? We see these three trends that are happening now with generative AI, where we can create text and images, create nice passages of text which sound very confident but may be wrong. Predictive machine learning, where we could use patterns that we've had in the past and use those for what's happening in the future. Like, for example, when do I maintain my vehicle? How often do I do it? And that gives you numbers that you could build on a risk curve. You have things like yield, disease risk, and so on. The problem is that if you're feeding bad data into your system, of course, the answer is not going to make any sense. And then finally, this turns into control and robotics. So you could do things like steering, spraying, sorting, and many others, right? You could extend this from the beginning all the way into a factory and look at all the ways that robotics and machinery work now. I was recently at the Google conference in California. I went into a Tesla dealership and I saw the robot. The humanoid robot that's supposed to replace all of us. I was not impressed. And I was standing there looking at it. I was like, this is interesting. This is the first humanoid robot I've ever seen. And three really big weightlifting guys came out of the gym and they go, that guy can't lift. So, and I think the challenge is, it really depends how and what context we use these things. Now, there's a lot of talk around data centers where AI is stored. Right now, AI is a gigantic sledgehammer that has trillions of pieces of information about it. For example, it knows everything about penguins. There's probably no reason that your farm application has to know about penguins, I assume. And it means that instead of using a massive data center to run that AI, you could use a teeny tiny device on the device, an AI model, that only knows two things. It knows the difference between a weed and a grass, and it can tell the difference, and it can show you, using a picture, it can understand the difference. Those small AI models are based on chips that currently don't really exist, although there's more and more being created. Right now, AI, the whole AI revolution, is a software thing. It's not a hardware thing yet. And companies are struggling to keep up and build more hardware to accommodate the massive demand that's come out of this. So we're going to see more and more of this happen, tiny on-device AI. For example, you can go to your microwave and say, baked potato, and it knows what that means. It knows how many minutes. It does not know about penguins. I hope not. Using the largest tools in the world to solve small problems doesn't really make sense. And that's one of the things that's going to change. So as we see on-chip versus data centers, this really makes a big change. But where does AI actually work? Where do we see that? In things like sensors, cleaning data, modeling data, making recommendations, deciding, and acting and learning. And all of these different phases involve different types of data coming in and different processes, whether it's AI or machine learning or something else, happening on the other side. So really, when we see this as a workflow, it comes from collect sensing data, predict what's going to happen with that data, make a decision, and act. And the question is, which one of these elements are you handing over to autonomy? Are you telling your robot, here's the answer, go and do this? And which ones are you thinking about first and saying, do these numbers actually make sense? Is this what we should do? Having a human in the loop to approve these automated processes. So right now, we see that AI is good in things like pattern recognition, prioritizing what to inspect, summarizing notes, building calculators, scenario planning. AI is not very good at math generally, generative AI. That uses a different process called compute. So you really need to think about, is this doing math? And if it is, maybe the answers are wrong. On the other side, doing things like diagnosis, automated machinery, poor quality data, that it just accepts as the truth, of course, is going to have very terrible answers. I think the really important thing is that you need to start with a costly decision and then ask whether the data, automation, or AI can make it easier, cheaper, or better documented, or some kind of improvement. You always want to say, like, here's our target KPI. This process is going to help that. And if it doesn't, why are you doing it? Google has the money to burn to figure these things out. You should actually work on things that deliver real value. So I'm going to show you a couple examples in irrigation, in machine vision, and with weather, but I think all of them are about building tools that you could actually use, put on your phone, and you can make them work. And if we look at maturity, we see this a spectrum of we could do things like, I want to build a program that grabs records, or does irrigation calculators, or storage alerts. Those are easy things to do, as opposed to cattle monitoring, crop triage, spot spraying can be much more complicated. And on the other side, like automated drone everything, even more complicated still. So we really have to think about what level of technology, what are all the interoperable pieces, and how can we make it work in a sustainable way. The real takeaway here is that bad data yields terrible results. So if a sensor is broken, or you're feeding bad data into the system, or you've collected 20 years of bad data and you're trying to predict what happens next, of course there's going to be huge problems because the pattern that you put in doesn't make any sense. So it really comes down to finding that decision. What are you trying to do? Listing the key factors and putting together a simple prompt like we'll do today. And then we're going to do something using a web application. You can put it on your phone and then, use that process over and over again. Once you build it once, it's free forever. So you can keep on using it and make it work. And there's different kinds of AI. You have things like assistants like ChatGPT that will answer questions. You could have like this type of intern mode where it will draft plans and options and actually think about the job and expand it. And autopilot will just take action. And the problem is that taking action, you really have to understand what's going to happen. Otherwise, it may do things that are unintended. So as we look at this autonomy, it's really a spectrum between assisting, supervised AI, remote, and finally autonomous. And we see this, all the data that we're gathering is coming from sensors. So really the critical part is the sensor data good? Does it make sense? If a sensor's off, does that suddenly feed in bad data that starts creating all these other unintended effects throughout the system? And that's where it becomes really, really critical to have the right sensors, to have processes that say, do these readings make sense? And maybe there is an extreme emergency and the readings do make sense, but usually when they're very off, there might be a problem. And we see this happening in many different ways. For example, when we're looking at using trees or identifying sheep, or the best headline I've ever seen, phone in one hand, beer in the other, moving cows. The ultimate dream, right? And I think that this idea of thinking about, what inputs are important? What are you trying to build? What is the logic of those processes that you do over and over again? Looking at, okay, what output do we want this to be in? How are we going to take this element, this idea, and build into something that we could use, and then add human review to make it make sense? So I thought of an idea. What would be useful if I just had on my phone all the time, and I can get real life data for, like, example, price inputs? So I put together this app that shows a few different inputs. This is all it does. Every day it updates, and it will just show me new prices. I could check my phone 20 times a day. It will constantly load new data every time I open it, right? And maybe that's a starting point to looking at trends, to looking at how things change, to making predictions, and so on. At the absolute simplest point, if I know where the data comes from, it's possible. So what I'm going to show you is called a harness. The one we're going to use today is called Cursor, but there's many other ones like anti-gravity and other AI programs. This particular one was just bought by Elon Musk for $60 billion by SpaceX. And the idea is that it could start building, we're not going to use any technical terms or anything else, it will just put something together. Now, I wrote to ChatGPT and I said, write me a prompt to create a single-page HTML-based irrigation calculator, which includes CSS and JavaScript inside of it, give context around Alberta, include the details I need to create the app, and put it into a paragraph. And then it wrote me a prompt that I could use and feed into my other system. So it actually knew the things that I was going to ask for. Like, for example, it told me about all this other stuff. And of course, before you paste it in, you want to read it and see if it works. So the moment of truth, let's try it. Hopefully this works. This could be terrible. So I'm just going to grab the prompt, and I'm going to open up Cursor. I already have it open on a folder. This is called Ardar, and I paste it in, and it's going to think about it. Obviously, it didn't work. All right, one second. Let's try that again. Here we go. It's thinking, and it says, okay, I understand what you want. Let's look at things like soil moisture. We'll figure out our formula. We'll look at clay and loam textures. We'll look at gross irrigation. And this started from my original prompt, and it's putting together this Alberta irrigation calculator that we'll take a look at in just a second. So as we're going, it's gathering all this data. It's thinking about what it's trying to put together, and right now it's writing the code. So we'll see that come out in a second. While this is doing its thing, you can take a look at the one that I built. So I put this in, and again, this doesn't use, hold on, here we go. All right, so this one doesn't use AI. It's created with AI. On the left, you have inputs that you could put on your iPad. On the right, it shows you charts, dashboard, and you could use this as a calculator that's specifically designed for your specific use case. So you're able to customize this, and this was like a 1-second prompt. You put it in, and a minute later, you get the output. Let's take a look and see if it worked. Apparently, it's still thinking. It really works, I promise. Yeah, not embarrassing at all. It also requires internet, so we'll see if that works. Oh, here it goes. It's thinking. All right. Okay. Let's move on, but we'll come back to it. So there's this idea that there's these two concepts, automation and artificial intelligence. And automation often follows simple rules. Like, for example, in the stock market, you could have systems that say that have been around since the 70s. You know, if this price goes to this, then automatically do that. But we can create many more pathways of artificial intelligence that are much more complicated and much more nuanced to build real complex, interesting elements that we can put together. So let's do this thought experiment, and we'll go to describe an apple. Right? Like, what is an apple? How do we make that work? Do you have any idea? I'm sure many of you are probably going to say something like red or round or whatever. And here's the problem. The problem is that if we defined rules for everything and we tried to match based on those criteria, not only would we have an enormous amount of edge cases, like, for example, the sun is also round, it's also red, an orange is also round, and so on, right? It would take so long to build the rules for everything. What we end up doing instead is just creating different buckets where we could say, okay, I know that it's not an orange, but I also know that it's kind of looking like an apple. With millions of examples of apples and oranges, machine learning can look at those differences. Not because it knows what an apple or an orange is, because it knows that it fits into a particular criteria. And we could see that happening here, where we have the difference between a model that's trained on a healthy leaf, nutrient deficient, pest damage, and disease, and then we train the model to recognize those categories and feed in a completely brand new leaf it's never seen before. And it says, okay, I think that it's diseased because it most closely fits in the world of images of this particular model, right? So we're able to build very fancy machine vision, machine learning models that we can train with other real examples in the past to predict new ones in the future that it's never seen before. And to do this, we have our data that we've gathered and labeled, and it could be historical data as well. And then we could take that data and start to break it apart and say, okay, so if this pattern holds true over a lot of data, then we could build machines that could help us sort the data in a predictable pattern or build those pieces. And here's the idea, where we have the classification system that's trained on the difference between tomatoes and cucumbers. It knows what to do, and then we could start getting to processes where the computer or the machine could decide what to do in what application. Does that make sense? Right? So we could decide what we can do as we go through each part. But here's the problem, that sometimes computers are wrong. This is a very famous example. And I don't know how many of you eat muffins, but I would not want to eat a Chihuahua by accident. And of course, if your vehicle is doing this, that could be an incredibly big problem, right? So we have our irrigation calculator. It says it's done. So let's take a look at what it came up with. All right, so here's the page. It gives you field and crop. It tells you which ones you want to pick. Field area, soil moisture, water balance inputs. Oh, thank you. It was amazing for me. Hold on. All right. How about that? Okay. Perfect. So here's what it built. It put together the context. You could see that it has drop-downs for different types of crops. You could put in the area, you could put in the type of soil and moisture, water balance inputs, and calculate irrigation needs. And you take a look at the output and say, okay, this may not make sense. In fact, it even put in a disclaimer at the bottom, and it says, not a substitute for soil tests, district water orders, or professional agronomic advice. Verify allocations first, you know? Very practical advice. But this tells you its assumptions, and you can go through these and say, okay, there's a problem or something's wrong, fix it, and it will go back in an iterative cycle until it gets better and better, and you have the product that you're actually looking for. And then, once it's done, you could use it 1,000,000 times for free. You have this scale of economy where you're able to use it over and over again. So here's an example with cows. So you could build a cow dashboard that takes a look at-risk cows. It understands what's going on. It's able to look at temperature as well as many other factors. It could do things like gait analysis, where you can see how each cow is walking, and it reports back what exactly is going on. And this technology exists. It's real. OneCup built something similar to this using machine vision, where you could do the same thing with hands. And I saw a project recently where somebody's working in a dangerous environment and they don't have free hands to do things. So they created a bot that looks at them on the camera, and whenever you go like a special hand signal, the machine opens or the gate opens or it does something, and you could control it using your hand, right? Something that you wouldn't have to reach out and touch something when your hands are full. That doesn't make sense, but something like that, you get the idea. So you could do all these different types of things using machine vision. And here's some examples. Whether it's soccer or recognizing bananas or recognizing cars, models can be trained on all different kinds of things. And here's an example in a factory where the person's loading the box, but they're loading the box properly, but they're loading it in an incorrect way. So we could have this chain of logic that says, okay, so we'll let you into the site, but are you wearing a hard hat, safety vest, etc.? And if you're not, what is the remediation? Like, for example, locking the door until you have it. And we see this kind of technology being used in many different areas, whether it's used for inspection or guiding or gauging, or looking at the same kind of thing of recognition and then trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like when it's normal versus what does this look like when there's a problem? So I decided to put this to a test. Let's see if it works. And I built an app. You can try it. Just take a picture. So when you do, you should get my machine vision model. And if you click the screen, you'll see your picture. And if you click the screen, it should take a picture that you could send to somebody. And I think it also puts a cowboy hat on you, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. It was a while ago I made this, and hopefully it works. We'll see what happens. So just point it at somebody, take a picture, and then you get a cowboy hat, I hope. Did it work? Taking a long time. It has to load a machine vision model on your phone that recognizes people. So basically, it's loading right now what person versus non-person looks at. The last conference I did this, people walked around and said, wait, you're not a person. What is this 22% person? I got rid of that just in case. But, hopefully it works. So did it work for some of you? It worked? Amazing. You see, there you go. And you can even change hats. This is a full service model. That's right. Okay, we'll move on, but you get the idea. I built this, by the way, in 20 seconds, so you could do the same. This idea in the past is that, this is a Lely-Victor system with cattle, but the idea is that the more data we have, the better it is. But the problem is that having more data doesn't equal good data, it just equals more data. So if you're not able to do anything with it, it's a real problem. And because of changing labor dynamics, and the idea is that we're trying to leverage new robotics and AI, it's really important to think about, okay, so how can we build systems that actually make sense, that are not super expensive, that are effective and cost effective, and we can actually use in a way that gathers the data but then does something with it. And I'll tell you a story about my TV. I have this Samsung TV in my kitchen, and I was sitting with my computer at the kitchen table, and I said to my computer, hey, can you connect to my TV? And it says, sure thing, and it just did it. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know that was possible. And I was able to build a custom app that I wake up in the morning and it says, hi, Sydney, just like Iron Man. And how are you doing today? It's raining outside. You need an umbrella, things like that. And I just did it in 2 seconds because my computer was able to connect to my TV. I had no idea that was even possible. And that's huge when you think about the right to repair, because when you're working with interoperable systems, like Darcy said before, it's a huge challenge to work on the firmware to make things work together, right? To take a new kind of accessory from one company and attach it to a vehicle of another, you have to reprogram it and connect to it. And now that's possible. And that's something that wasn't possible 6 months or a year ago. And I think that's a tremendous change because you're able to connect to the devices you already own, build custom software really quickly, and test it out all within a really, really short amount of time. So using this kind of idea, the things that we're looking at today, linking to PLCs, linking to new kinds of data, connecting across the infrastructure, you're able to do that and start bringing data in and then make sense of it. So it's not just about collecting data, it's also about putting it into a spreadsheet or a format or a web page or something you can check with your phone and it's telling you sensor live data, and it's basically very cost effective because you only build the program once and you already own the sensors. And we see this data interoperability ecosystem where we have sensors, connections, whether it's coming from services like the weather or the markets or something else. We transform the data and we can clean it, map it, standardize and validate, and then turn it into dashboards or useful tools that we could actually use for things. And this happens in common data formats that many of you are already aware of, things like CSV and JSON and APIs. Those are the language of what the AI models can speak to. So they're able to really quickly transform that. I'll show you another project. This is one I built, and it's called Build a Standalone Single-Page Agriculture Weather for Alberta, Greenfield, no API keys, using a free API key. So we'll do this in a second, but I want you to take a look at it, and you can grab the code and see the one that I built. And I really built this one in 20 seconds. It put together this live weather map that not only shows you the weather of each individual place and gives you some agriculture indicators and provides you with place information, it also uses Environment Canada weather warnings, and if there's an Environment Weather Canada warning, it will pop up at the top and tell you there's a problem. And that problem we can trace down. Now, this is just a starting point. This is literally 30 seconds of work. My question is, where could you take this next? How can you make this useful in your context, right? And this is just one single web page. And the idea is, if you could take this kind of thing and build it out into something that has new sources of data, new information. For example, you take this app, you cross-reference it with PLC sensors that you already have, you're going to be able to use that information in real time to make decisions based on the weather. And it just goes from there, based on market pricing, based on so many other factors. As long as you have access to the data, you're able to integrate that and cross-reference to make better decisions. So, I think usually at these talks, somebody says to me, well, I don't need an accountant or a doctor anymore. You still need an accountant and a doctor. That's the really important takeaway here. It works great for some things, but you really need human judgment to make it make sense. You have to do things like check numbers because they don't make sense otherwise. So let's do a quick example and we'll try to build this out and see what it comes up with. So I'll create a new HTML page, and I'll just add this to a new chat, and we'll just drop this in. Here. See if that works. Okay. So now it's figuring out what exactly am I supposed to do. So it says, okay, I'm going to try to build this. I'm going to build this first piece that will look at the last project. And I'll say, okay, I'm starting from the beginning. I don't have anything else. It's going to look for the Government of Canada API for weather, which is free, and it will start pulling in that data. And it did it by itself. I didn't tell it about it. It's going to look for other free weather sources that are available, and it's going to try to figure that out. And it says, okay, I'm going to put this together and build it in this 2.html. So we'll give it a second, and hopefully it works. So it just wrote the HTML, which is like, I don't know, 1,000 lines. And here it is. Right? So very similar to the app that you downloaded on your phone, same underlying instructions. And I think we're moving away from this idea of like prompt engineering, like you have to know a prompt to get a particular output, to really more like recipes. What makes sense? What's a good thing to ask? How to put that together? And using domain knowledge combined with a little bit of technical expertise, you could build amazing tools like this, and this just generated what you have on your phone in just a few seconds. And this one might even have a better 5-day outlook forecast that they put in there. So I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I think that you're able to think of new creative uses to take that data that you have, to connect to it, to build new apps and put those things together. So I think that as we're looking at new kinds of apps like this, new tools that are very small, easy to use, they're free over time, so you're not really paying for them. This program that I just used, Cursor, costs $20 a month. The other AI programs are basically free or cheap, and as you get into more complicated data wrangling, there's a very small cost to building tools you can use over and over again. So as we look at where AI can work and what makes sense, in many places in the ecosystem, it's possible to take all the different elements and use them together by streaming data and cross-referencing them. Yes, you can make decisions based on small pieces of data that you have, but once they get larger and more complex and interconnected, then you could start to have real insight and make better decisions based on real data and leverage those pieces together. So thank you very much for having me. And there's the slides if you want them.
Well, Dr. Shapiro, that was really interesting. It kind of just explodes the imagination and the creativity that's out there, and it is possible. But we've got a couple of minutes for questions. I'm guessing there's going to be a ton of them. However, I guess it'll be whoever's the fastest in putting up their hands. Okay, we've got one already, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. So, the question really is, this AI has all this knowledge but zero context. How do I give it more context to understand what I'm actually doing so it can know? And yeah, you could feed in more and more data. The problem is it only can keep a small amount in its memory at any one time. So I think that's a problem that we have to overcome in the future because the context windows are relatively small. You could have access to the largest library in the world, but only be able to hold in memory 500 pages at a time. So yes, things that it knows about you in those 500 pages, it can make great decisions. But the totality of your life and decisions and everything you know takes up more than 500 pages. So it can access those things. What I find is really helpful is making help files. So instead of doing the same set of prompts over and over again, teaching my AI how to do a PowerPoint, I'll say, create a file called skills that teaches you how to do a PowerPoint. And then every time I do a PowerPoint, I drop it in. I do my CV, and I'll drop this in, or a profile about me, or the information I'm doing, or my research projects, and I'll say, here's a bunch of starting information to give you context. Now come up with a good idea. It's going to be much, much better because it knows where to start from. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, it looks like we've got another question over here.
Test.
And I think Dr. Dave reminded me last year, we need to say your name and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm from Olds College. Darcy referenced the fact that he has got a lot of rainbow equipment, right? And a long time ago, I used to work for a company called Farmer's Edge, and we used to put a CAN plug in to collect data. So today, with these more generic tools, my assumption is you could take shape files from various pieces, and you could optimize that overall crop production. Is that correct? So you can take a John Deere operations file and put it with a CNH file. You just have to have the domain subject knowledge. Is that correct?
So that is correct, and I'll tell you a crazy story. One of my students who went to a class where we talked about this built an app where you drop in a shape file, you drop in a GeoJSON file, and then it tells you how many pumps you need in order to build a pipeline on that square, and sold it to his company for tens of thousands of dollars. Literally out of my class, I did not get a cut. So having a bot that reads SQL, that understands JSON, that can bring those things together in context is really a game changer because you're able to use that data much more effectively, especially coming off of Edge AI. Thank you.
We've got another question towards the back here. We're making Lydia do the 100-yard dash.
Hi, I'm Kristen with Blue Rock Animal Nutrition. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to security and privacy. If you put your data in, where does it go? Is it protected?
Thank you. That's a great question. And this is the first time since the 90s that producers have asked me to build on-farm AI systems, literally sitting in a machine on their farm that they can see with no internet. And when somebody asked me this the first time, I was like, nobody's ever asked me this on-premises hosting. Everything is in the cloud. And I think people are becoming more aware of, like, what do you need? What size model do you need? Maybe you don't need the largest frontier ChatGPT model, and it could be something small that runs on your phone or runs on your premises and so on. Different kinds of AI models and different kinds of licensing packages have different data sharing agreements. If you're using ChatGPT for free, they're training their models in the future on your data, which is not a good place to put confidential information. If you have a corporate package and you're using the fancy version, they say they're not going to train on it, you have to trust them to say that's actually true. Most of us use AI through things like Microsoft Copilot because it's built into Microsoft Office and they give us access to it. And if you have a corporate version of that, they don't train on your data and it's aware of your files and brings those together. So I think really checking which AI model you're using, how they're using your data, and if they're going to train on your data in the future are really critical so you know where your data is being held and if it's just going to come out when somebody else prompts for it.
So if you have those small units you were talking about, is security and privacy better on them because nobody else can access them?
Yeah, because they sit in your premises, you can see them, and they could be things as simple as a camera that's able to detect between, a leaf and a weed, and the AI model is actually held onside that device, right? So there's a new device from Coral that's a tiny circuit board, and it has an AI model on it, and it's able to do prediction, but only for a couple of very small, specific things, as opposed to everything.
So the overload of data gets down into bite-sized pieces. I think we've got another question in the back there. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Jordan Roberts from University of Alberta. I'm just wondering if you could speak to some of the baseline skills that might assist from getting, your output from a prompt to an actual applet that you can apply.
I think this is a really interesting question because these things are changing. I mean, first of all, you can ask the AI to tell you what you don't know and provide you with a framework of what you should build. So for example, you don't know anything about JavaScript or CSS or web design, or even if apps are possible, but in one prompt, like I did previously when I said, give me a prompt that I can use, it's going to provide a lot of that context that you can edit and figure out. And if you could say, I don't like the look, I want to improve it, it could try iteratively to go out of that stage. So I'm not saying everyone has to become a programmer or a web designer. I think you could take your knowledge and try to figure out, using the tools, what's a framework that works, what makes sense. So I think that's a good place to start. And I think it overcomes this barrier that we have of technological adoption when people are like, it takes a huge amount of programming to understand this. And I find this in my own classes. It's really important for my students to understand what's possible, what are the recipes, does the data sit in the enterprise so they're able to ingest it and do things with it. It's less important that they understand every esoteric detail because the computer can code better than they can. And I think this is the trade-off as we shift to new ways of leveraging AI.
So it's about asking good questions.
Yeah.
That goes back to my journalistic background of being able to ask the questions. The more specific you get, the better answers you get. Good. Okay, we've got, who's going to make it to the questioner first? Whew. Coming up the home stretch. All right, we've got a next question.
Very maybe philosophical question is, where do you see the risk of complacency coming in? Because we as a company have been using AI in several applications and for probably 12 months now. In some areas we've seen people getting very complacent, relying on the AI. So how do you combat that?
So that's a really good question. I did a corporate training recently with the CEO and the CFO, and they're sitting at the same table. They both put in the same spreadsheet into their AI model, and one gave a 1-year forecast and one gave a 2-year forecast with the same prompt. One of them is wrong, right? And I think the challenge is that if we're not actually looking at what comes out, does it make sense, before building it into a pipeline, then there's a risk that we're actually integrating bad data that only gets worse as it accelerates. So I think human knowledge, like really taking your knowledge and critically looking at what comes out of it, is really important. AI tends to be very friendly and optimistic and often tell you that you're right when you're wrong, and then later on says, I'm sorry, you were actually right, my bad. And that's something that we really have to overcome. But building this, critically looking at what they're telling you, is a new skill, just like anything else. So I think that we really have to have really core understanding of the fundamentals to see if it makes sense. As of last year, AI was telling people that there's 2 R's in strawberry instead of 3. You know? And if we give up the ability of counting, of doing math, and things like that, then we're not able to critically analyze what comes out of it. So I don't think you have to be an expert in programming the same way that you were a year or 2 ago, but you do have to know the recipes and what to ask for. If you build a house and you don't know that it needs plumbing, that's not going to be a great house. It will look fine, but there'll be a serious flaw. And that's what's happening now with AI. People don't know, and you still need to build that domain expertise, but maybe in a different way.
So the importance of proofreading is also
Definitely.
key. Yeah. Okay, we've got time for another question or two. Anybody else? Searching the room. Oh, okay, wow, now we got 2 pop up at once. Okay. We'll pass the microphone down on this one and run the mic around for the other one. So we'll see who gets them. Okay, you got the microphone first. Go ahead. And your name and where you're from.
Yes, Jansen from High River. I wonder, is our technology capable of selecting sick cattle in a feedlot?
So, I mean, that's a good question. I think it really depends on what does sick mean? Like, what does it look like to the computer, and how does it know? And if we think about sensor data in general, like what makes an apple versus an orange, what's good versus bad, sometimes it's really easy to tell, and sometimes it's really complicated. And training a model on something that's complicated either means more and more training, so it has more examples to draw from, or it's really difficult to know. So I think the answer is complicated. It depends. We could use different sensors. We could use like infrared. We could use sensors like temperature. We could use sensors like audio. We could use sensors like video. But yet all of that may or may not work. I read a paper recently about cow noses are like fingerprints, and each one's unique. Why don't we have cow fingerprinting via cow noses? And I was like, hey, that's a great idea. But I'm like, wait, feedlots are not the cleanest places in the world, and you are not going to keep that camera clean enough to actually be able to detect. Like, so that makes sense in theory, but when you actually apply it in the real world, it just doesn't work. So I think that, you know, as we have better models that are better at prediction, maybe if they're trained the right way, they'll have the right answers. But it really depends on high quality data going to the model in order to give you the best results coming out of it. Thank you.
And another question over on this side.
Hi, my name's Melody McKinnon. I'm with Alberta Goat Association. I know this is very basic, but I'm not an IT person. So my understanding with things like ChatGPT and other source AI programs is they can't actually source, say, research information from the last 5 years. Is that correct?
So it's not really correct. It just depends on what tools the particular AI has. So maybe, you know, like a few years ago, every discipline, every field had a paper like, I asked about ChatGPT about geography and it gave me 10 citations that don't exist. But they fixed that problem, and now AI models can do searches. In fact, right now, half the searches that happen on the internet are done by AI models, not by people. So I think they're getting much better at finding real-world grounding, but you also have to look at like what data is it trained on, what does it think that's important, what is it pulling from, and does it make sense? So is it pulling from Lethbridge, Canada when I'm looking for context, or is it pulling from Lethbridge in the UK? And if it's in a different context, it may not actually make sense because it never asked me and it never verified what was happening. Like, and you can see this, like systems like Root actually are trained on real data. They give you much better informed answers based on context. Right? So I think it just depends, but they are getting much better all the time. And if you prompt them the right way and you build the right workflows, they're able to use real data, like your data, in order to make decisions. If you just leave it really vague and say, make me a spreadsheet, it's not going to know where to pull from or what to do or how to put it together, so you're going to get something that's probably made up. And I think that's a differentiator. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'd entertain one more question. Somebody got a really good, oh, no. No more questions. Okay. I'm getting the hand signal. So, but that was just really fascinating. And we've come a long way from Darcy's dad's notebook. And I think it's really fascinating to see how it can be used. And I think, you taking away some of the fear of it makes a big difference. And are you sticking around for a little bit? Okay. So Dr. Shapiro will be around if you'd like to ask him some questions later on. But let's give him a round right now for a great job today. Well, that's awesome. And, we just, it kind of, like I say, it takes our mind, expands our mind as we think about the new possibilities that could be out there and could be done so quickly. It was great to hear Darcy's perspective earlier this morning, but we're going to carry that on into our next presentation as we talk more about the data-driven farmer and how you can transform your equipment into a research engine. And helping us learn more about that is a former farmer himself, Herman Simons. Herman found data and research even more fascinating than hogs, and he is now manager of Smart Ag Applied Research at the Olds College of Agriculture and Technology. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Herman. Let's give a hand to welcome him.
I was trying to stay away from my hog days, actually. Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Darcy and Sydney here for just coming ahead of me and actually laying out and showing a few of the things that I'm going to be talking about. Let me get this going. Oops. So behind this slide, there actually should be a picture of a tractor with a seeder, and behind that there should be the liquid fertilizer tank that should be showing there. And the reason I wanted to show you that is because it had some sentimental value to me. I'm originally from Holland and came over in '88 as a young farmer exchange student with a dream to start farming. And during the years and being in Holland, it's all small farms there. Coming out here, being able to step on a big piece of equipment, it was like a little, Tim the Toolman Taylor moment, like being able to get into those big tractors and actually going into the fields and operating those pieces of equipment. In those first few hours that I sat on that tractor, I was on there for about 3-4 hours, I actually covered more acres than my dad, or actually the average producers in the area of Holland that I'm from, own as far as land and farm. So it was quite the experience. Throughout the years, though, I was able to help out on crop farms. I was able to help out in a greenhouse. I was on livestock farms. I've been active in dairy. I've been on the farm with the sheep. We had our own sheep for a while as well. And as a result, I got to experience many different areas of farming. And the beauty of that is that it opens up your eyes, right? You see things from another side. And any type of business, even whether it is farming or not, will give you the opportunity to appreciate how challenging it is for an entrepreneur or a business owner to improve their competitiveness, their productivity, the yield, with the intent actually to improve their profit. We're always working towards achieving our goal, whatever that may look like for us as an individual. We also have to recognize that we're constantly changing, right? Like the farm continuously changes, and as we look at what's all going on a farm, it's actually quite complicated. There are so many different variables that influence our day-to-day activities, and quite frankly, most of them are out of our control completely, like the weather, or mostly out of our control. So we do our best to actually identify what is in our control and what we can do with and how we can manage that. Items like volatile markets. We work in a financial setting with exchange rates that we really don't have any control over. Government regulations, and I'm happy to see we actually got a farmer as an ag minister. That's quite promising. An unpredictable climate that we work with and environmental conditions that we have to deal with on an ongoing basis, labor, you just go on and on. I put a bunch here on this slide, and when I went over this slide again, because it was generated with AI, I actually noticed there's still some stuff missing on there. So as a producer on a day-to-day basis, you get offered all kinds of opportunities, products, technologies that you're enticed to adopt and to actually purchase. If, in my farming days on the farm, if I would have believed everything that I was told, I would have been able to grow a pig and get them to market within 10 days. I know that's not realistic, but that's, in the end, when everything is added up, that's where we would have had it, we'd be there. So as a producer, the challenge then becomes, how do we cut through the noise instead of the crap and actually accurately decide which option will actually bring value to our unique operations? And we all heard of the slogan, and today it's been brought up a couple of times, like if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And fundamentally, what I will talk to you about today, which Darcy already started laying out, is a tool that will allow you to do that. It can help you gain a better understanding. It can help you gather the data on your farm, understand your fields and the variability within the fields. It'll provide you insight in what worked, potentially what didn't work, and ultimately what may lead to change in management for you to become more profitable. So it's called the on-farm precision experimentation, which traditionally, if you compare that to traditional farming research practices, it's significantly different. Traditionally, we've been looking at small plot or strip trials, and by itself, that has some logistical and practical challenges for us to implement. Small plot or strip trials, you're going to have to work around it. And I don't know how many producers there are here, but how often has it happened at the end of the year that the situation demanded for you to move on and you actually ended up with no data? The other part with small plots and strip trials is that you have a very small area within the field, where if you use on-farm precision experimentation, you can actually make use of the whole field and implement it in such a fashion that it's within the normal practices and your normal operation of your farm. It does mean that, yes, you do need to do a little bit of work up front, but we all have to do a little bit of work up front, don't we? So you need to know what your prescription is. You need to have a plan of what your trial will look like. But ultimately, what you're going to get is a full field trial where you can actually evaluate your optimum fertilizer or whatever variable you want to actually test, as long as you can implement it in a variable rate application. You can actually test that on your field with your own pieces of equipment. So we started this project 2 years ago, and we've now recently started the second phase of this project. Both these projects were graciously funded through ARDAR, but we've had many other additional organizations participating in it, and I'll show you that in the end. 2 years ago, we started that, and our main priority was, okay, well, we do have all-farm precision experimentation. There's a tool that's developed by the University of Illinois, which is called the DIFM tool, the Data Intensive Farming Management tool. So can we use that? Is it practical for in Western Canada farming practices? How is that different as compared to Illinois? Lots of corn, lots of soya, smaller fields, different scenarios. So what we started doing that is actually implement, we started with 5 trials in 2024, and we did 11 trials or 10 trials effectively in 2025. And I'm going to talk about some of the results of that here today. So what does that look like? If you decide to implement a trial on your field, you can come to us and we'll help you design a trial through this DIFM platform, where we're actually, based on your target application and a range of multiple volumes. So like in here, you can see we have a target normally of about 144 pounds per acre. And then we set some target ranges in partnership with the producers or with the agronomist that the producer works with. Then we can actually implement those trials, and rather than having 16 plots or a small number of plots, you can see the number of plots you can actually lay out on a single field. In this case, there's 2 trials happening on this particular fields. There's a seed trial happening, and then there's a fertilizer, like a urea trial happening. So when I'm talking about fertilizer, or if I mix up that term, please be aware that I'm only talking about the urea component of that trial. So the beauty of this is, if you know what your guidelines are and you have your routing, then if you know how to lay out the project in correlation with your seeder, and you keep your sprayer in mind as well, and you keep your combine in mind, then you can actually design the projects in such a fashion that you get lots of data and with limited data loss. So after harvest has been completed, so first you do the seeding, you get your as-applied maps, those as-applied data gets uploaded into the platform. You actually go combining, make sure your equipment is calibrated, right? So then you actually get that data uploaded into the platform as well. And the platform generates a large report. I'm not going to show that here, but the reports that come out of there actually does an evaluation of the available data, and it actually provides an economic impact of where the optimum seeding rate for your field may be. So let's go and look at at the seed result. This is results of 2 years. And what you see here, I hope you guys can read it properly, but at the bottom, you'll see there's a range from 80 pounds to about 160 pounds of seed for spring wheat is what we're talking about. This was executed over 12 fields, a total acreage of about over 2,400 acres. What we found was 33% of the fields actually were you're pretty much at the optimum. The other fields, the suggestion was to reduce the optimum, reduce the amount of seed, because economically, like the input cost in relationship to your yield would suggest that there's a better outcome possible. Now, this is 1 year type of data. Any kind of agricultural data, we always have to say, be careful with how you interpret it. It's not a one-time fixes everything. We still need to use your common sense with all the data that you see, right? If just calculating the opportunity, and that includes the acres that would suggest there was no change needed, that's over $6.50 an acre for all those wheat acres that we see in here as for an opportunity that we identified. If we do that with urea, So not necessarily the same location. Some may have been a double, like the one field that I showed was both seed and urea. Some trials were just a urea trial, some trials were just a seed trial. But we've had about 1,600 acres within the urea trial, and we just varied the urea component in here. There's one in here missing, and that's the liquid fertilizer component. In that case, there was also a little bit of an opportunity there, not as much as the other ones, but the amount of, the dot would have been too far out, so it's not, won't fit within the pounds because we're talking about gallons, so I couldn't put it on there. In essence, though, what we saw with the fertilization is there was nobody really at the optimum level. We were either trying to push the yield or, our desire to manage our input cost, allows us or leads to us kind of trailing that optimum outcome. It is interesting though, like if in general speaking, they both end up close to that $10 or between the $10 and $15 as far as where the opportunity loss is in fertilizer application. You add the two up, if we are allowed to do that, if we add the two up, there's an optimization or a cost of opportunity here that's still at around $20 an acre. And I think that's significant. Now, if we dig deeper in the amount of information that we have available, then actually we can overlay the variability or the field data that we have collected with the management zones within the field. Now, within the platform, that's not something that's currently available within the platform, but it is something that we've been able to do. And if you look at it then, it also shows you within that particular field that there is different ways of managing the field and the management zones in order to get your optimum financial results. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you always have to put in more on the higher productive zones, but you might actually be having to put in more on the median zones based on the underlying reasons of that particular field. So it brings to the point that you have to learn what is your field and what are the reasons for the variability within your field. You cannot just say, this is the outcome, I can just use that and we can move on from there. Just please be careful, always understand what is the underlying variability within your field. In addition to our practical, like to the economic side, if we talk about what was the experience from the producers working with this tool, like one of the feedbacks that we often got is, this was so easy to implement. Like once we had it up and going, it fits within our normal operating practices. And that was one of the things that really, I think it's one of the strongest benefits of this process. There's still a lot to be developed and further, validated. We ran into some small situations where, a producer decided to buy a new header, so we went from a 40-foot header to a 45-foot header. You can imagine what kind of impact that has if that happens during the summer once the field is already seeded, right? But we were able to make it work. The other thing that we ran into from a platform perspective here this last spring is we had a field that was going over 2 time zones, because this year we have fields in Saskatchewan as well. So we had a field that was straddling 2 time zones. That created an issue, things like that. We had in the first year, we had fields where we had 2 combines on. That was brought up already by Darcy as well. So in the US, they never heard of that. Like what, more than 1 combine in the field, like where they actually developed the program? Yes, we have up to 4, 5, 6, depending on how big your farm is. You can have lots of combines on your field. So that was all those little learning things that we are having to deal with and that we're working with. and working through in order to make this platform work better and provide value to the industry. So I would like to thank all the contributors. Like, we have had a lot of help from and contribution from ARDAR, Alberta Grains, like all the different organizations that I mentioned there. Of course, this doesn't happen in isolation with just one person. There's a big team behind it, and the team is across Western Canada. If you are interested in participating, like this year, we have 25 trials happening in Alberta. We got 5 trials happening in Saskatchewan. We will need another 25 trials happening next year in Alberta, and we're looking to spread it out all over the province. We've been working on the further analysis in order to look at, can we use this tool for regional recommendations? And the initial results are very promising, but the problem is you need data, you need fields, you need lots of places to put together in order to make that work. If you're interested, please scan the QR or connect with me or follow up on that email that's mentioned there. It's ofbe@oldscollege.ca. So just send an email saying you're interested, and then the team will connect with you and move forward from there. That really is it, and I have time for questions if there is any.
Okay, one quick call. Does anybody have any questions for Herman? Oh, we've got one down here. Go ahead.
So originally we were looking for a particular type of producer, right? The producer that had the ability to, that understood the technology that they were working with. What we are looking for now, and I'm looking here through my notes, is actually one of the requirements. We have a few different things that we're looking for in order to make this work well. So your field should be about 100 acres large, because if you don't have a long enough stretch to get your combine going and get a nice flow of your combine, you know, you need plots that are at least 300 feet long in order to get a proper load and good data. So that's part of it. That's a critical element as well. If you have a field in the end that has a lot of lodging, you know, like in the end, that might not be the best field with the right results that is usable, because every time you stop and start a combine, you do have some issues around data quality. The other thing we're looking for sure is of course your equipment needs to be variable rate capable, right? Like whether it is on your seeder, it could even be a product that you want to trial on your sprayer. As long as your sprayer is variable rate capable, we can incorporate you within a trial within this project. And of course, and I think most people are, like, you need to have GPS capability, right? And the more precise it is, the better it is. But, you know, like, that's essential. Yield monitoring on your combine speaks for itself. If you don't have a yield monitor and you're not using it, you don't have it calibrated, don't have your combine calibrated properly, you're going to have impact on the quality of your data. I don't know if I saw that earlier today, but if you have crap in, there's crap coming out. So that's a key thing that we have to work on. What we are looking for as a bare minimum, you have to be comfortable with guidance lines. So you need to be able to put them in, get your AB line in, or have the coordinates, but then make sure and have the capability to ensure that those lines are correct when you go and combine, because those lines are going to be provided to you. So we need to have confidence that you actually use the lines that have been provided through this program, so that we get the best alignment between seeding and harvesting. It would be perfect if you know how to upload your RX lines and your guidance files. Like that would be perfect. We can talk you through it if need be. We do have people on staff that have the capability to assist you with that. But from a farm management perspective, we would, I think we should be at a point that you can do that and be comfortable with that. For the project, but not necessarily for you as a producer, we look for fields that have some natural variability. But from a producer perspective, if this project and the feedback that comes back that there is significant variability, it might provide you insight whether or not you should implement variable rate application on your field, yes or no.
Well, thank you very much, Herman. Definitely some interesting ways to begin the research role even in your own operations. Well, our final presentation this morning comes to us courtesy of Farm Credit Canada. Neil Wagner is the Senior Product Owner for Ag Expert, a software program many of you might be familiar with. And Morgan Wadsworth is an Innovation Specialist at FCC's Innovation Lab. They're here to share with us today about some of the exciting technology they've been working on as well to help boost that knowledge transfer we've been talking about this morning across Canadian agriculture, including things like that new AI tool Root, which was co-produced in partnership with Ardar. So we'll welcome up Neil and Morgan.
Hi, thanks everybody. Thanks for having us. Big thank you to Ardar for inviting us out. What a great facility and event. Very impressive. Also, thank you to Alberta for having some amazing highways. I'm from Saskatchewan. It's a treat driving through Alberta, except the hail. I could have done without that. I needed Dr. Shapiro's weather app to help prevent me driving right into the hailstorm yesterday. That was a little sketchy, but made it through. So, most people know Farm Credit Canada. We're a leading agricultural financer, but a lot of people might not know we also have a host of other products and services out there. We have a knowledge suite around learning events, newsletters, publications, so please take a look at Farm Credit Canada's website. We also have, is it moving forward here? Yes, great, thank you. We also have advisory services that we're building up as well, so things like farm transition planning, getting more and more attention at Farm Credit Canada. And my colleague will be speaking in a few minutes about our software development capabilities as well with Ag Expert. So I'm Morgan Wadsworth. I'm from the FCC's Innovation Lab. We are a small team, and we get the freedom to do exploratory work with new technology trends and things like that in the industry. So I do have a cool job. I like to do, break things and see how it works out, but then I have to share those learnings internally. So Root is our first foray into the AI world for our Farm Credit Canada. We typically aren't a very opinionated company. You won't hear us talk a lot about certain topics and make claims. So this is a big step out of our comfort zone. So artificial intelligence will offer opinions and things like that. So this is pretty exciting for us. What we've created is essentially a simplified version of generative AI for the farming industry. And Dr. Shapiro mentioned it. What we're trying to do is differentiate ourselves a little bit with really being or taking a curated approach to the data sources that Root will use as far as generating outputs. So as was mentioned, if we're going to get information from a farm in UK and that's involved in the output, it might not be as valuable to the farmers here with the boots on the soil around. So we want to really over time curate that those data sources and that content source. So Root was launched quietly back in June of 2025. We didn't market it. We still aren't marketing it very well. We just put it out there and organically wanted to see how are people using this? Is there value in what people are getting out of it? And turns out there is. I'll share a little bit of data about how it's being used. But the real reason why we got into considering Root as a new product or service from FCC was over the past, I'd say, 8 to 10 years, we've been hearing more and more about knowledge gaps, and access to information and services was getting harder and harder to find, so this gap was opening up. And with the, everyone familiar with when ChatGPT hit the market and the storm that it caused, we figured this was probably be a great time to try and fill that gap and really start to curate content and maybe make it available easily to the food and farm industry of Canada. So that's why we got into this space. So currently Root does a little bit of what you would normally get out of a ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and other platforms. So you can send a crop photo right on the spot. You can have it, you just ask a simple question, what do you think is going on with my canola plant? And Root will give you its perception on, here's what I think is going on, some recommendations in a formatted approach to how you might want to handle it. Basic knowledge for, I know, the expert farmers out there, but again, it's just one of the capabilities that a lot of people are actually using AI for. So Dr. Shapiro mentioned the oil change. I've actually got 3 different conversations in my paid ChatGPT account that are strictly for restoring an old car I'm working on. And I love it, the context is amazing, and it's really incredible. And a story that I do have is I was diagnosing vacuum line issues on an old 1984 wagon, and having a conversation with ChatGPT about this, and it's extensive, this has been going on for weeks and weeks. In the photo that I sent it, I asked, would these vacuum lines, are they getting cleaned up? Is this about, what they should look like? Without asking, ChatGPT noticed a different thing on the engine and commented with the upgrade that I made on it that this was going to cause incredible idling issues. So it was looking for things within the context I gave it in the photos and guided me down and we found a solution with it. So love it, it's getting better, but you do have to give a good context, and I hope we're doing that behind the scenes with the data sources that we're partnering up with. So one of the ways that farmers are using it currently is around planning. So we're seeing a lot of people looking at HR plans, training plans. If they're hiring people for the summer, they want to do it as best way possible. So they're actually looking and talking to Root to find out what should be in a training plan. How can I onboard these people, make it safe for them, effective, get them up and running as best as possible, and also not add more work to my own plate. So we're seeing people do that. Technology adoption plans is another one. People are using it for content marketing, social media marketing as well, which is pretty cool. So they'll say, hey, I need to generate a social media post, and Root can help out with that. So this is older data, so the numbers have increased a little bit, but we have almost 12,000 active users as of last quarter, I believe. Conversations, we were hitting near 13,000 at the time, and this is the really impressive part. We started last year at about 11 minutes average conversation time. We're now at 16, and I think that's increased to almost 17 minutes per conversation. So pretty cool. I know, we have online services where customers can sign in and look at their financing and everything. They're not spending 17 minutes staring at their mortgage balances, so this is pretty cool that we're bringing that much traffic to FCC's website. So put differently, as of last February, farmers had spent 3,300 hours having conversations with Root. And that's pretty impressive, we think. So one of the things that Root has also been able to do is we've trained Root on a data source of programs and funding made available to agriculture and food operations across Canada. There's over 500 of them at any given point in time. And then through conversation, Root will actually figure out which ones might apply to your operation. And right now, or 2 weeks ago, Root would have said, just learn more. You can go take a look at these programs, and you can go off to their website and explore and potentially apply. Last week, we enhanced Root's skill to be able to not just point you to the programs and learn more about them. Root will now guide you through the application process to help you complete or start an application for grants and funding, which is a pain point that we had heard about from the industry, that it's tough to find, and it's also tough to know what to include in these grant applications. So here's an example here that if you did ask Root to help you out, so this is an ARDAR off-calf funding example for, I believe it's nitrogen improvement, BMP. So what it'll do is you'll land in a brand new app, And it'll give you an overview of the program where you can, reach out to the administrators, go to their actual website, but we'll actually provide an overview of all the important details. And if you want to continue, then Root will actually extract all the data from the templates that we've received from these programs and present it back in a UI where it overlays itself now and can guide a conversation about that grant application. So you'll see on the right-hand side, there's the Root, there's the typical text or chat window that you would have, as well as each individual field has the ability that you can ask Root specifically about that field. So it's pretty impressive. Some of these application forms are quite lengthy. We've had some that we've processed that are 11 pages long, so I think that's probably where Root might be a little more helpful. One key feature for Root is you can attach a document. So if you have BMP action plans, project descriptions, invoices, things like that, you can actually attach the documents and then ask Root to go ahead and complete as much of the form as possible with the information that it sees in those documents. And that, we think, is going to speed up a lot of the application time, or the creation of the application, I should say. So here's an example here. So again, if someone had continued forward, they're going to get another page that says your document is ready with everything that you've told me to include in it. And again, the user has final control of what's in the document. This isn't necessarily just hit the button, let Root write it all. We do want people being, having ownership over this. So what you can do is open up the document, and if there is an editable PDF with the program, Root will actually fill the PDF in, and you can actually download it and walk away with it and go ahead and apply. So we are not integrating directly into the program administrator's capabilities. So this is very much something that would assist you in going off and then working with those partners. Speaking of partners, Ardar was our very first official partner to help build and design real curated, important and local data behind the scenes here. So not just with data and research that they've provided, but also the subject matter expertise. They've talked with us countless times on what it's like for people to go through the application process, what's involved, what to expect. And so big shout out, thank you for being a great partner. It is early days, so Root will not be perfect. It's going to take a lot of time. We're going to have to curate. Like I said, the data is going to have to evolve. We're going to have to continue to manage what is feeding Root and its capabilities and how it best serves you. But we do hope at some point in time that Root becomes the first place you want to go to in case you are curious if there's any funding for research, sustainability work, projects that you want to do on the farm. We're hoping you can come here, provide a little bit of information about yourself, and then Root could help guide you and get you down the right path. So, with that said, I do invite you to take a look at Root. So you can go ahead and use the barcode. That'll get you right into the web app. Also, I'll be sitting at one of the tables in the other room, so if you want to come over, talk to me, find out a little bit more about how it's built, how it works, I'd be happy to chat. And yeah, looking forward to the day. So thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Pretty tough act to follow out of this list of speakers today. Some great presentations. So you're going to hear a lot of repetition from it, and thanks to Dr. Shapiro, it's going to be much more difficult to sell prescriptions to AgExpert. I'm a senior product owner for AgExpert, and I'm here to share my story. I guess I can advance that. I'm here to share my story and talk about AI to explain how I see it as the next evolution of digital ag. So, I mean, this has already been dated as of this session here, but I'll put a little definition as to what we think of when we say AI. So, artificial intelligence is really a collection of technologies that work together in different ways. Large language models, or LLMs, are probably the most familiar. Tools like Root, like we just seen, ChatGPT or Google Gemini, sit on top of these models that answer questions, summarize information, and generate content. Then there's machine learning and forecasting, which finds patterns in the data and use these patterns to make predictions. This might include predicting yield, crop pricing, weather trends, or input cost forecasting. Next, there's neural networks, which are used to connect large amounts of information together that can identify complex relationships that are just too difficult for people to see on their own. There's also recommendation engines. Think of when Netflix recommends movies, or when Amazon recommends products based on previous purchases. And finally, natural language processing, which is what allows us to interact with the technology through conversation, text, and voice. So that is how we can define AI. One of the biggest misconceptions, though, is that AI suddenly appeared in the last few years. In reality, machine learning and neural networks trace their roots back to the 50s. You ever see that movie, Catch Me If You Can, with Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio? It was actually based in the 60s, but Carl, which was Tom Hanks' character, he was looking for patterns that Frank Abagnale was forging checks around the whole countryside, and he was using that to try to predict where Frank might strike next. So this is really a great analogy because researchers at the time were looking for ways to see if computers could look for patterns instead of just taking instructions. In fact, the early neural networks were developed to help banks recognize those little numbers on the bottom of the checks to automate deposit processing, and that's something actually that Frank was forging at the time. So agriculture, it experienced its own technology milestone in the 90s with GPS, giving producers a new way to use data for guidance in the field. Recommendations engines emerged in the 2000s and has quickly become part of everyday life as we know it. Google advertising and social media platforms use them every day to determine which ads, posts, and information are most relevant to us, and we see them in our feed all the time. So clearly the idea of using data to support decision making isn't new. What has changed is our ability to access and move information. So there have been advances in networking, making it possible to collect, store, and share data at a scale that simply wasn't practical before. You know, new things like edge computing is a really neat concept, but sooner or later those all have to come back together. Information can move between equipment, software platforms, satellites, weather services, and mobile devices almost instantly. Computing power has increased. Data has become more accessible. And tools that were only available to corporate and required teams of specialists are now becoming accessible to everyday users, including farmers. So I grew up on a farm about 70 kilometers north of Regina, Saskatchewan, and began working my career with independent ag retailers. My job was hauling in hydrous cultivators, slinging chemical boxes, blending fertilizer, soil testing, high clearance sprayers. So this is where I truly cut my teeth in the industry. This background taught me that farmers make a lot of decisions every day. In most cases, these decisions were based on experience, which was mentioned, observation, and instinct developed over many years and likely with many scars to show for it. That's incredibly valuable, but experience can be influenced by memory, recent events, and emotion. We're all human after all. Sometimes the last good year, or even the last bad year, can have more influence on the decisions than we'd like to admit. The challenge isn't that the experience is wrong. The challenge is that the experience alone can only process so much information. As my career progressed, an opportunity came along to move into technology and bring my industry experience to IT. Eventually, my path led me here to Alberta, where I had the opportunity to work with places like CP Rail, Syncrude, TransCanada, and CGI. Industry trends at the time created opportunities to work on large-scale data projects, and these organizations were investing in data warehouses, analytics, reporting, decision support, and in enterprise systems. So at first glance, these may have seemed like separate initiatives, but they indeed were all working toward the same goal. They were connecting information that had previously been siloed across their organizations and were creating a common foundation for decision making. And at the time, we were calling that business intelligence. The objective was simple: turn information into insights that could support better decisions. So looking back on that experience, the lesson was very clear. Better decisions start with better information. Twists and turns led me back to Saskatchewan, and at the time as the digital ag really began to emerge, I had the opportunity to return back to the ag industry and help develop a digital ag program for Richardson Pioneer, one of their locations. What interested me most was the opportunity to apply the concepts I had just learned throughout the tech industry to agriculture. And so following the blueprint I had learned, I thought, well, I could take equipment data, operational information, environmental, and agronomic sources and put them together into a common place. And then we could start to do analysis so that we could help guide the growers make better decisions. So putting that into action, I learned there were lots of solutions out there for precision ag. There was new farm management software like AgExpert, and found connected sensor technologies that all were creating digital records. So this was great news. And it felt like for the first time, information that had once existed in memories, notebooks, filing cabinets, and disconnected spreadsheets could be captured, stored, and shared. And it worked. Today, farms have more information than ever before. Equipment data, satellite imagery, weather information, soil tests, market information, financial records. I think we solved, in large part, the data collection problem, but success created a new challenge. We went from having too little information to more information than we know we can do with. So more data doesn't automatically create better decisions. In many cases, it created more complexity. So the question is no longer, how do I collect information? The question has become, what do I do with that information? And that's where the evolution begins. And this is where I think AI comes in. I believe AI is the next evolution of digital agriculture because it helps us turn that information into actions. And it can do this in a few different ways. We can look at descriptive AI, which will help us understand what has happened. It can take that large amount of information, summarize it through reports, dashboards, and insights. And then we can look at predictive AI, which helps us understand what is likely to happen, anchored by statistics. Examples include yield forecasting, crop pricing, and identifying future risks or opportunities. Then there's generative AI, which is creating something new. And these are tools, some really cool looking tools out there that can write summaries, answer questions, or generate recommendations, and probably best describes what people think of AI in the current moment. And finally, prescriptive AI helps us perhaps answer the most important question: what should I do? And so I think this is where AI can help support decisions around planting timing, optimization, risk management, and operational planning. So to be clear, what makes all of this possible is the foundation that digital ag had already created. The data was the investment. AI is how we begin generating more value from it. Okay, so where does all this become real? Well, at AgExpert, we've been helping producers capture and organize information for more than 20 years. Today, we have two important products with more than 28,000 users that manage over 7.5 million acres. These are AgExpert Accounting, which helps producers maintain accurate financial records and better understand the economics of their operation. And AgExpert Field, which helps to digitize those field activities, inventories, crop rotations, and cost of production information. So these are the products that help build that digital foundation that modern agriculture relies on today. But as I said, the opportunity is much bigger, and it's our job at AgExpert to do something with all that data and guide producers to understand that it can be analyzed, compared, and transformed into insights that are valuable to their operation. That's where the next evolution begins. As we started thinking about AI at AgExpert, we believe there are a few principles that have to guide everything that we do. First, I'll repeat this, AI needs to help make data more valuable. I already mentioned producers invested a lot of time and money into creating those digital records, so the opportunity now needs to turn. How do we turn that information into better insights that result in better outcomes? Second, producers need to remain in control of their data. The user information belongs to them, and it will not be shared. AI needs to work on their behalf. Third, AI needs to understand Canadian agriculture. Farms operate under unique conditions, and recommendations need to reflect real-world Canadian farming practices, not just generic assumptions. And finally, transparency matters. Trust is built when producers understand where recommendations come from and how their information is being used. Because at the end of the day, AI only creates value if producers have confidence in it. So the vision for AgExpert and AI is to create a digital representation of the farm that helps producers better understand the impact of their decisions before they make them. In technology, we call this a digital twin. So for the first time in our software, we have the ability to bring information together from across the operation and view it as a connected system, rather than a collection of separate records. We're already seeing that foundation take shape in our platform with features like cost of production analysis, Crop Plan Plus, and sustainability reporting. And we continue to build on that momentum by developing new modules such as weather intelligence, productivity index, and regional benchmarking that can help turn everyday information into action. As these connections grow, the AI becomes more powerful because we have moved beyond simply recording what happened and have now begun to understand why it is happening and what is likely to happen next. So that's the shift from recording the farm to understanding the farm. And that's where I believe the future of digital ag is heading. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. And again, there's a QR code for you to scan if you want to learn more about Ag Expert. But thanks so much to Morgan and Neil. And as they mentioned, they will be around at their booth. And all of our speakers will be around this afternoon, at least for a little while, for further questions. So it's been an information overload kind of morning, lots of great stuff, and now it'll take a little time to process it all. But the good news is you can do that over lunch. Now, before I turn you loose for lunch, though, a few notes about this afternoon's Choose Your Adventure program, and there is a lot to choose from. Now, your best bet is to spend a little time over lunch, dig this out of your bag, and it's got all the workshops on pages 11, 12. You will notice that some of the workshops are repeated, so that's why you kind of need to do a little planning on your route and then see the schedules and the topics and the locations. There's a wide selection of things to see, play with, and learn from. That ranges from everything like virtual fencing to pasture pipelines, managing your nitrogen with drones, to priming your pulse crops, and using AI in canola agronomy, and much more. Now, like I say, several of them do repeat, so you want to plan your route around. They will be taking place in the old barn, the Final Mile tent, and the UCVM tent are outside, and then we've got 2 sessions here as well. The Pulse ones and Olds College are here as well. These are the north and south of the main event session. So that's when you're looking on your map, or when you're looking on your program, that's where those locations are, and then note them on your map. There is a map there to navigate around as well. And if you're wanting to do the hands-on kind of feel, the off-CAF funding tent, you need to meet there first, and then they will take you to the demos that are running this afternoon. So if you're wanting some information on the off-CAF programs, and they've got some really cool demos happening there, just meet first at the tent at the time, and then they will take you to the places where you can play. We'd also like to thank Ben Reed. Ben has been letting us demonstrate on his land around here, and for his partners, Calvin Reed and Jason Michael are both here with us today. So a big thanks to them for being part of that. Also, Nutrien donated the fertilizer that will be demonstrated, so you'll have to let us know if the nitrogen we apply makes a difference to that little bit of crop. But thanks to Nutrien for being a participant as well. Now, lunch is just getting underway in a couple of moments. And again, lunch will be in the Long Branch Saloon, which is outside and just down a little ways. It does take a little while to get everyone through, so you can feel free to visit around and grab a coffee. Lunch will be served until 1:30, but just keep in mind the first workshops do start at 1 o'clock. So if you have one planned at 1 o'clock, you might want to jump into the food line as soon as possible. So keep that in mind. And we'd like to say a big early shout out to the Lions Club for providing another great barbecue lunch for us. I know we got rave reviews last year, and so they're pleased to be back, and we're happy to have them. And a big thanks, I think I saw her running around somewhere this morning, to Deborah Rice-Solomons, keeper of the Heritage Center, this beautiful facility that really works so well for us to do all these various things. That's kind of the last you're going to be hearing from me. On Ardar's behalf, we invite you to stay, network, explore, and we want to thank you for joining us for yet another roundup. We will be having the program running till about 4:30 or 5. Perhaps I'm going out on a limb, but I think if you don't want to take these home, they'd be happy to recycle them and use them again next year. Probably if you just check in at the front, you can do that on your way out. Also, keep your eyes open for a date for the research showcase. A lot new this year to talk about in the research world, including a new location in Calgary, and so we'll keep you posted on that. So thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll turn you loose for lunch. Like I say, you can manage the line a little bit yourself and visit and, again, study your program so you know where to head this afternoon. Have a wonderful afternoon, and again, thanks for being part of the Ardar Roundup.